Would I be the AZZ hole if I played another One Bites the Dust at my brother's funeral? My brother died. I miss him like I lost one of my limbs. Maybe it's stupid, but I want people to remember the person he was. Leave it up to my brother to give me a mer challenge from impractical jokers like I really did feel like tonight's biggest loser. My dad and aunts have been involved in planning his funeral, and they have been planning a very Catholic funeral service. He wasn't Catholic and wouldn't like the very expensive casket, the flowers, the church with a lot of people he didn't know there. He thinks it's way too fancy, way too much. He and I had a lot of morbid discussions. Side effect of me being a goth teenager. He told me he wanted to be cremated and his ashes thrown into a ceiling fan while Raining Men played in the background. Obviously not an option. Together we made up a funny funeral playlist, including songs like Highway to Hell and Another One Bites the Dust to remember him. I want to bring a speaker and play Another One Bites the Dust at his wake. I would explain it to the people at the wake and say that I wanted to preserve the person he was. Maybe I could give a speech or tell the story and explain how he saw death with humor, not sadness. There will be a lot of extended older family members there who weren't very familiar with him and are Catholic. So I've been thinking maybe not, but I really want to preserve his memory as he was not what people think he should have been. I think my cousins and sister would get a kick out of it. Would I be a hole? Update: this morning I talked to my dad about the wake. I suggested that maybe I could give a eulogy and talk about my brother and then play an instrumental cover of the song. I found a violin one that I really liked. My dad listened to the cover and looked at the list that my brother and I made. He actually smiled and laughed and said that it seemed like a great idea. I hadn't really been thinking about my dad as much as I should have. I thought of him as opposition. I guess he cared way less about the Catholic stuff than I thought. I also reached out to some of my brothers as friends. Some of them had already been planning a party in his honor, and they were happy to listen to some of my ideas. We are going to play all the songs on the list, plus a few others that apparently he told his friends about and not me. And we're going to start working on logistics for scattering not human ashes from a ceiling fan. Am I the a-hole for breaking my sister's nose? My sister used to kick my ass on the regular. She had mad anger problems and would go berserk over the littlest things. One time I turned the light on while she was trying to sleep, she beat me up and I ended up going to prom with bruises all over me. All through the years, I never hit her back. I was a super sensitive kid, and if I ever hit back, I ended up crying to my mom about how I loved my sister and hated to hurt her. After I graduated, she had calmed down a bit, but she still had issues. Coming back from a small party one night and she is back on her old bullshit, just getting mad over something stupid and going totally crazy over it. We get home and get out of the car and say I'm driving home. She keeps saying I'm too drunk even though I'd only had 2 to 3 mini beers. She grabs the back of my shirt and I'm so pissed off at her, I turn around really fast with my fist out to hit her arm or something. She immediately lets out a blood-piercing scream and drops to the ground. Blood is spurting everywhere. She leaves a trail as she runs inside and wakes up our mom and dad. Turns out, I broke her nose pretty fucking bad, but my mom and dad kept saying it couldn't be that bad because I had done it and that she must have really been fucking with me for me to have done something like that after all these years of her beating on me. I felt so awful, I cried and tried to say sorry, but she ended up going to the hospital. I don't feel so bad now because she purposely never paid the bill, thinking she could bully me into paying it, and she never lets it go. She always says I'm the reason her credit and stuff is bad and that she still has collections agencies calling her over the ER bill. I ain't paying that shit. Consider it payment for the years of abuse.
Dead name me while I'm in labor? You will never see your grandson again. I know I'm a fool for letting my husband talk me into letting his mother be there for the delivery of our first child, but I gave in to be polite. What I was not ready for, however, was for my mother-in-law to start screaming, "Push, Alexandria." To me, when that's my dead name and she knows I go by Alex instead because I'm non-binary. I was so flabbergasted by her words that she actually distracted me from the pain for a little bit, but it all hit so much worse once I realized that my mother-in-law was unironically dead-naming me in the labor room as I pushed out my child. At first, I just snapped at my husband to do something, but the poor idiot was so overwhelmed that he couldn't even speak to the nurses. As my mother-in-law kept screaming my dead name, I just yelled at her to shut up, and one of the nurses intervened and escorted her from the room, as it was clear that I didn't want her there anymore. A few hours after the delivery, the baby was perfectly healthy. Thank goodness, I saw my mother-in-law again. At first, I was waiting for her to apologize and explain that she just accidentally used my dead name in the heat of the moment, but then she started yelling at me for being so frantic and tense, going as far to say that I was a bad mother for getting so worked up over a small comment. I just looked at her and stared, asking if she was really telling me, from day one, that I was a bad parent. She nodded her head. I then told her that, if she didn't apologize, she wouldn't get to see her son at all in the near future. Lo and behold, my mother-in-law stood her ground until the nurses had to escort her out again, and now I think my son may truly go his first 6 months without seeing his paternal side grandmother. My husband can't even argue, he just feels so terrible for not being of any use in the delivery room. Good riddance.
Anybody else dealing with a lot at once and feeling overwhelmed? How do you cope? This summer, after nearly 5 years together, my girlfriend and I decided to break up. I'm a 22-year-old male and she's 21, with us being in different grades due to her being from another country. The breakup was initiated by her, but I agreed to give her the space she needed. It felt strange because we had both agreed that the past year had been the best in our relationship. We rarely fought during that time, and we had an emotional final night together, where we cried and said our goodbyes. The next day, I had to leave our college town for good. She still checks in on me, but I can sense that she's moving forward with her life. Meanwhile, I had placed all my hopes and dreams in our relationship, so I'm struggling with feelings of guilt, wondering if I should have fought harder even though it was her decision. Adding to the emotional roller coaster, I recently found out that my father, who is in his mid-60s, has cancer once again. He had successfully beaten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma about 6 years ago, but now they suspect he has a different form of cancer on the right side of his mouth. I'm finding it really difficult to hold myself together. This is such a crucial point in my life as I'm supposed to enter the workforce and become an independent adult, but I've already lost my girlfriend, and I don't want to lose my dad too. Our bond hasn't been as strong as it was when I was younger, and I miss that connection dearly. Especially now, after learning about his cancer, I yearn for that father-son relationship to be rekindled, even if only temporarily. I dread the thought of something happening to him and living the rest of my life feeling like we never had that close bond again. Please, any advice or support would mean the world to me. I feel shattered right now, but I want to assure everyone that I am not feeling suicidal. My boyfriend's entitled best friend told him I cheated so that she could date him. My boyfriend has known his best friend Carly for 5 years, ever since Carly moved in next door to him. I know she's obsessed with romance books, so I think she's convinced herself they'll fall in love just because they're next door neighbors. And watching Taylor Swift's You Belong With Me music video has added to her delusions. Anyway, it took a while for me to notice the signs, but thinking back, it was clear from day one that she did not like me. For starters, when my boyfriend introduced me to her, she said, "Oh, so you're the little girlfriend." At first, I brushed it off, but everything got worse from that moment on. One time, she even called me a pet because I'm always following him around. I've told my boyfriend that I don't want her around me anymore if she's just going to keep making comments like that. He told me she was just intoxicated that day and didn't mean it, so I should give her another chance. Plus, all his friends are her friends, so it would be impossible to go somewhere she isn't. But fine. I put my feelings aside just this once and gave her the benefit of the doubt. So, we end up going to a friend's house party. It's pretty PG stuff, so if she says anything wild, alcohol doesn't work as an excuse. We're one of the first people to get there and we're just talking with our other friends. At some point, I lay my head on my boyfriend's lap and as if on cue, Carly shows up. She comes running towards my boyfriend, calling him bestie, and has her arms wide open for a hug. I guess she expected him to get up and hug her back, but he just stayed seated and pulled me closer to him. She noticed that and her face became visibly angry for a second. Before she switched back to happy, she said, "Bestie, you're not even going to hug me now? Is it because your girlfriend's here? Is she the jealous type?" I rolled my eyes at that. My boyfriend said, "No, I just don't want to hug you." I tried so hard not to laugh. I knew she was pissed now, but she masked it really well. She responded with, "Well, why not? You love hugging me. You always hug me to sleep, remember? Come on, just hug me." I think she was trying to make me jealous because of her comment about him hugging her to sleep, which is so not true. My boyfriend just shook his head and she kinda gave up, but she threw the nastiest glare my way. Eventually, my boyfriend got up to get us something to drink and Carly ran over to sit next to me. She told me, "Listen, just because you have him now doesn't mean you'll always have him." I asked her what she meant by that even though it was so clear she wanted him. She said that I was just his plaything and he'll get over me once we have intimacy. Little does she know, he says I'm the best he's ever had. I asked her why she wanted him so badly and she denied it to the ends of the world. She called me stupid, but once my boyfriend came over with our drinks, she switched up. He gave me my drink and she instantly pouted, asking where her drink was. He said it was in the kitchen and then took my hand to take us somewhere she wasn't. I think he's been seeing that I was right, that she doesn't like me and she wants to date him. After the party, he went low contact with her. He barely answered her calls, and she calls him like 50 times a day. Whenever he did answer, he would make any excuse to hang up. Other times he told me to answer just to piss her off, which it did. She kept asking me why I was answering his phone and saying that I'm being controlling because she can't understand why he would stop talking to her all of a sudden. It wasn't until we went to a party, where we knew or at least thought, she wasn't invited to. My boyfriend and I had lots to drink and we ended up separated due to our different friend groups pulling us apart. I was with 2 girls and 1 guy. He was hitting one of my friends, so me and the other girl were trying to hook them up. I guess from afar it looked like we were the ones hitting on him. I don't know actually. I didn't even touch the guy. But as I would later come to find out, Carly had convinced my boyfriend that I cheated on him that night with the guy. My boyfriend confronted me 2 days after ghosting me, which I assumed he spent with Carly, but he later reassured me that wasn't the case. He asked me to tell him the truth, that if anything had happened with this guy, I could be honest with him and he wouldn't be mad. I asked what he was talking about and he told me Carly had snapped pictures of me flirting with the guy and showed them to my boyfriend as proof. I asked to see these pictures and it didn't take long to see that they were photoshopped. Not only were they poorly edited, but my outfit had been switched with the one my friend had on, the one who was actually hitting on the guy. I wouldn't expect a guy to realize that, but I was wearing my favorite top that night, which was nowhere in sight in this picture. I told him to call up my friends to confirm my story if he didn't believe me, because unlike me, they weren't as wasted. He said he didn't need to because he believed me. He just needed to see if Carly had actually lied to him to ruin our relationship. Which yeah, she did, but it backfired completely on her. My boyfriend called her up and said he never wants anything to do with her ever again. She cried on the phone and begged him to reconsider, that I was the cheater and she let it slip that he should be with her instead. I laughed so loud at that. She was trying to hide it, but she had finally reached her breaking point and I was so happy I was there to witness it. My wife thinks I am treating her like an idiot. I love my wife very much. We are from two different cultures. In hers, if a person needs something you give it to them. If you need something, you get a job, get paid, and buy what you need. While I earn most of our income, my wife runs a day home and cares for our kids and the house. We take our money and pay our bills, put some away for emergencies, retirement, kids' education, etc. We also keep an account for traveling to visit her family or paying her mom and dad to call us. My wife has given away some of my stuff because her family needed it. She gave my trekking backpack to one of her cousins because he needed one. She could have bought him a $30 Costco backpack instead of giving away my $400 bag, which he promptly got stolen. The last straw was my laptop. I was away for the weekend at a friend's wedding that she did not want to attend. Her auntie was visiting and said my wife's brother needed a computer for schoolwork. Since all I ever did was play games on it, she gave it to her brother for university. I tried to get it back. She said it would be rude. I explained that the only reason she saw me do it to play games was because I was home. When I leave in the morning and take it with me, it is to earn money doing a paid job. She said I didn't have to talk to her like she was dumb. But she refused to ask for it back. I replaced it with money from the travel fund. Which means that we will not be seeing her parents this Christmas. She is pissed. She said that I took money that belonged to both of us to buy myself something. I asked her where the money should come from. Should I take it out of our retirement? Our kids' education? Does she want to put off replacing the furnace with winter almost here? I said I could cancel that if she wanted. She said that I could have just put it on the credit card. I asked her to explain where the money to pay the credit card would come from. She thinks I'm treating her like an idiot. I just think she needs to stop giving my things away.
My mom says my boyfriend is unattractive. I, 19 female, am in a very happy relationship with my boyfriend, 21 male. I wanted to share this with my mother, so I showed a picture of him to her, and what does she say? I'm sorry, but he is very unattractive. Firstly, no he's not, I find him really beautiful. Secondly, that kind of broke my heart. She didn't ask anything else, just that, if this relationship progresses further, which I hope it does, how am I supposed to ignore that? Will she think my children are unattractive too? Will she resent him when they meet for the first time because he's unattractive? I just think it was a completely unnecessary comment and I'm a bit pissed off.
Well, at least he won't be doing your mom. How my house became a pizza place. Back in the day, we had a phone number that was really similar to Pizza Hut's number. This mix-up was super common and caused a lot of confusion. It was before everyone had their own cell phone, so we had to get caller identification because of this. For years, we got calls from Pizza Hut's customers ordering pizzas. The funny thing is, no matter how many times we said, sorry, wrong number, some people just wouldn't listen. We had drunk callers who would ring back 4 or 5 times and then start yelling, saying things like, I know this is a Pizza Hut, you jerk. Or give me the number or else. This happened a lot, and even Pizza Hut knew about it. They apologized, but they never gave us anything for the trouble of our phone ringing off the hook. Then, something crazy happened. Pizza Hut corporate put out an ad in the paper, on billboards, and in the phone book. But guess what? They messed up the number and put our number as one of their locations. It was because the numbers 1 and 7 looked the same, apparently. After this, our phone started ringing like crazy. Instead of just a few calls a day, we were getting 100 to 200 calls. At first, we tried to set up a message saying, this isn't Pizza Hut. Their number is XXXXXXXX. But the calls didn't stop. People left angry messages, some even shouting, I want a pizza, this is ridiculous. I've been told all sorts of mean things, but we were just trying to help. My dad eventually called Pizza Hut and asked if they could change their number or pay for us to change ours. The manager was really rude and said a lot of mean things to my dad. He even blamed my dad for bad reviews and losing customers. It didn't make sense to me why they wouldn't just change the number, considering it was causing them a lot of trouble. My dad decided to play a little prank. He told me and my sister to answer the phone and pretend to take pizza orders. We'd say, your pizza will be there in 1.5 hours. Then, when they called back, we'd say, sorry, the driver just left. If they called again, we'd pass the phone to someone else and they'd say, you're not getting your pizza, and we're keeping your money. We did this for a while, and even had friends join in. We answered calls all day, every day. Eventually, the Pizza Hut near us closed down. They threatened to stop us with a cease and desist, but when we explained the situation to Pizza Hut corporate, they didn't do anything. They knew what was happening but didn't want to fix it. I regret leaving my wife at the airport. My wife got a new job where she started making several times what she was making before. I was incredibly happy for her since this was her first time making 6 figures. I've been making 6 figures for several years now and have funded most of our lifestyle. She had a history of putting me down, but as soon as she started making more money, it amplified considerably. She'd criticize everything I would do and nothing I did seemed to be right in her eyes. As an example, we'd go on several trips a year, at least one international and a few domestic, which I've always fully paid for. Although we travel more than most people, she said that she wasn't satisfied because I never flew her first class. Although we stay in nice hotels, clean and safe 4+ star hotels, she said they were never Instagram worthy. She'd often compare our life to influencers and I'd have to remind her that what she sees on social media is not real. We went on a vacation along with her parents and sister. On the last day, we visited a few sites and we began the several-hour trip to the airport. Everyone slept while I drove the family around. We flew back home and as soon as we deplaned, she started yelling at me on the concourse. She said so-and-so's husband is doing X for their wife, and demanded to know why I'm not doing the same for her. She kept yelling at me as we made our way through the terminal. It was all just one big blur. As soon as we got landside, I suggested I get the car from the parking garage while she grabs the checked-in luggage. I see her waiting by the door and I pulled up as far as I could before I got to the handicap loading zone. She was yelling at me to move closer and it didn't matter because it was late at night. Although no one was around, it still doesn't sit with me right to park in a handicap loading zone. She was mad and came up to the car and started yanking on the door handles. She dropped something in the car and went back for the luggage that was about 30 feet away. I was getting out to load the bags into the trunk. She yelled something at me and something in me snapped. I told her I was not going to put up with this anymore and told her to call an Uber home as I drove off. As I was leaving the airport, I had a change of heart and decided to turn around and pick her up. I came back to the terminal and she wasn't there anymore. I checked Find My and it looked like she was moving along with the air tags in our luggage, so I assumed she must have gotten an Uber home. I come home and see a taxi in front of our home. It turned out she left her purse and phone in the car, while she went to go back for the luggage. She said it was some miracle from God that she found a taxi driver willing to drive her home without her wallet or phone, and that it was a sign for her to leave me. She moved out 2 weeks later and ultimately filed for divorce. I still think about that night. I question myself if things would have been different if I just kept my cool. I've lost my partner but I'm in a state of peace that I haven't been in a long time. How do I stop reliving that moment? I've since taken several trips through that airport and relived that incident every time. I've taken several flights since the incident and every time I pass by the area where this happened, the bottlenecked exit out of airside, I'm reminded of what happened. Sorry for the confusion.
What made you nope out of a friendship? I realized 90% of our conversations were them talking shit about other people and being extremely negative. That energy rubs off on you. Also had a sense this friend wanted me to fail, if that makes sense. Like my celebrations weren't really celebrated, and they got a sick sense of pleasure at me being knocked down a peg. She had a crush on a guy friend of mine, no biggie there, plenty of my friends have dated each other. We were hanging out one day and I went to change my son's diaper and left my cell on the table next to her. When I come back, she randomly says she's gotta go and leaves. Okay, sure. I grab my phone and it's open to texts between me and that particular guy friend. I didn't have a password at the time. She had scrolled back pretty far too. I called her out on it. She said she just wanted to make sure him and I were really platonic friends and him and I didn't have a thing going on. She could have just asked. Noped right out of that one. Oh, and we weren't in high school. We are in our 30s. She was a one-upper. No matter how long of a day I've had, hers was longer. Her schoolwork was harder. Her back pain was worse. I went to Tennessee. She went to 11UC.
You wake up in your 16-year-old body in the year you were that age. You have all of your current memories and abilities. What do you do with your life? Don't date that girl for almost 4 years. So she's available? Don't succumb to the stereotypes of the air and take that home economics class. I wanted to learn to cook, but was afraid because it was a girl thing to do. I would have discovered my love for cooking at an age I could have really done something with it. Find and meet my wife 5 years before we met. I need that time with her. She passed away 3 months ago and I'd do anything for more time with her.
Amber Alert. I hate to admit it, but whenever I've gotten these emergency notifications in the past, I've ignored them. Something was different about this one though. My phone buzzed and I took an extra second to read what it had to say. Amber Alert. Child abduction bolo for 6-year-old blonde male in back of a 2012 silver Chevy Impala. For a second it stunned me. That sounded just like my car. In fact, the description sounded like. Then I looked up in the rear view mirror to smile at Wes, my 6-year-old. Wes was singing the song to a Disney album and playing with his toy dinosaurs. This had to be some kind of mistake, I thought. So I tossed the phone on the passenger side of the car and pulled out toward the interstate. A few minutes later the phone buzzed again and I felt compelled to look. There was an update with a license plate number. My license plate number. Immediately my hands felt clammy and I didn't know what to do. I looked in the back of the car again and tried to retrace my steps. I had just picked Wes up early from kindergarten so we could grab some Baskin Robbins. I signed him out and we talked about Transformers on the way out of the building. He was wearing a mask of course when he came out, and that got me to second guess myself. Had the teacher given me the wrong kid? No, I know what my son looks like, I thought as I looked at the rear view again. He didn't seem to have a care in the world. So why was this alert popping up? I think I drove another good 2 minutes before I made it to the next rest stop and decided to call someone. Maybe I had forgotten to sign him out? Maybe the school had decided to make the call when they thought he was missing? Surely this was all a big misunderstanding. I made a call to the school to speak with the principal. Miss Shepard here, the voice said distractedly. This is Charles Bowman. I just wanted to double check with you about the sign-out sheet for Wes, I said nervously as I looked around the rest stop. I didn't know who to ask for help but I was feeling panicked. I figured if a cop came by I could square the whole thing up, let them talk to the school. This could be resolved, I kept telling myself. There was a short pause as the teacher looked up the information and then the principal came back on the line. I'm sorry. Who did you say you were? Miss Shepard asked. Charles. Charles Bowman. My son is in Mrs. Kemp's class, kindergarten. I came and got him about 30 minutes ago. I was sweaty. Something in her voice sounded off. And then she said something that made me feel numb. I'm sorry, sir. I think you must be confused. Wesley Bowman is still here at the school. It took me a moment to register what she was saying. It all felt like a bad dream. Check again. Because I'm staring at him in my back seat. I insisted. The principal placed me on hold and I looked at Wes again. He had stopped bouncing and playing and seemed to be paying extra attention to the conversation. "Hey buddy, you okay?" I said with a smile. Something was very wrong. The whole world felt like it was suddenly turned upside down. "Sir? Are you still there?" Miss Shepherd was back. "I'm here." The words felt dry in my throat. I didn't feel like I meant anything I said. It was just this overwhelming sense of dread filling my body. I just came from Mrs. Kemp's. "Wes is in class. So I would really appreciate it if you stopped this prank and told me exactly why you were calling." I hung up. I was staring at Wes in the backseat as she told me. But it didn't feel like I was looking at my son anymore. "What are you?" I asked, struggling to find the words to make sense of this nightmare. I didn't even understand how I had gotten an alert on my phone. After all, if the school thought that my Wes was in class, then who would send this? The phone buzzed again. Except this time it wasn't an alert. It was instructions. "Take child to 30 Sparrow Lane." I knew that place. It was a housing development in the shady part of town. Some even reported that there were drive-by shootings, but I didn't know what else to do except to listen to this mysterious messenger. I got off the highway and made my way there, all the while keeping an eye on the child in the back seat. Instead of playing like he had before, this time he was deathly silent. As if he knew precisely where we were going. As we got closer to the stop, his attitude changed dramatically. Suddenly he started screaming, a blood-curdling cry that told me there was danger here. I slowed down right outside the address, looking toward the desolated building and wondering who could have brought me here. My phone instructed me again. "Place child outside vehicle." At the point the child that looked identical to my son was thrashing, trying to break loose, screaming and gnashing angrily, trying to cut at himself with his teeth. "You can't do this, Dad. You can't." It sounded just like Wes. It made my skin crawl. Calm down, I insisted as I unbuckled and got around to his side. I needed this to be over, to get away from this insanity and get back to my Wes. The child was now hardly even sounding human, with his guttural shrieks and cries, his fingernails digging into my skin as he begged for it to stop. I managed to reach in and loosen his strap, letting him out of the car, and then hopped inside and locked the doors. I was too frightened to see what he might do to me if I stayed outside. He fumbled to the ground, seemingly unable to walk. Then a moment later he let out a painful cry, and a massive shadow moved from the building. I held my breath and couldn't believe my eyes. It looked like a troll. That's the best way that I can describe this monster. Its body was covered in soot and ash and moss. Gray and black vines twisted about its arms the way veins would as it towered over the child. With its mighty hand, which looked to be at least twice the size of my Impala, it scooped up the child. All the while the smaller creature screeched and twirled, trying to escape. But it was too late. The monster dragged it back into the shadows, and even after it had disappeared I could still hear its shrieks. I sat there in stunned shock for the longest time, too numb to move. Then my phone buzzed again. "You are free to go." I took Wes to ice cream that day, but I didn't eat a bite. All I could think of was that poor creature and how my fear had allowed it to be taken by a worse evil. I don't know what I experienced today, but I know now the world is full of magic. Both good and bad. I'm just happy that I have my son, my real son, here. Sometimes he smiles at me and I see a gleam in his eyes, and then I second guess. What if I made the wrong trade?
I want to call off my wedding because my husband is embarrassed about my culture. So I'm 26 years old and I'm getting married to my husband, 28. I'm from a small village and moved to the US 5 years ago. That's important because in such a short amount of time, I'm not assimilated to the US culture and I'm still very involved in mine. When I met my husband, a few weeks into us dating, he told me he was going to marry me, as a joke, but I told him how marriage works in my culture and he praised how beautiful it was. Fast forward to now. We agreed on doing 2 weddings, one of my culture and the other an American wedding. In my village, when you get married, both spouses get a gold bangle sort of thing. It's equivalent to a wedding ring. There is a ceremony and party for that as well. It's molded on your wrist and can't come off unless you use like a saw or something like that. During my traditional wedding I received a gift of these fruits I ate back home and are truly my favorite but haven't been able to find in the United States. My husband jokes about he was not looking forward to smelling that every day. Which is fine because I hate the smell of sausage, but it's something he loves. I stayed back home for a week because I had missed it and my husband came home early to prepare for the American wedding. I came home Monday but didn't see my husband since he had work, and by the time he finished I was sleeping. We had dinner last night and I saw that he didn't have his bangle, and he told me he thought it was just for the party. I explained to him again how important it is to me. And he said that I couldn't seriously expect him to wear it all the time. I asked him why not and he told me it made him look unprofessional. I got upset with him and left. He ended up calling me to explain how it holds no cultural significance to him, so I told him. I rebutted asking him if he was fine with me not wearing a wedding ring as it holds no cultural significance to me. He got a bit upset and gave me a lecture on how if we were in my country he'd wear it. I feel so turned off and uninterested in this relationship, to the point where I am thinking of calling off the wedding.
Bro, I swear to gosh, the funniest thing just happened at work. So I'm a big fan of Weezer, right? I haven't even told the story yet. What the heck are you laughing at?
My delusional mother-in-law thinks that she can replace me in my child's life, so I told her that I cutting her OFF. I have been in a relationship with Andrew for 3 years. We hit it off pretty quickly and after a year we moved in together. After a couple of months of dating, he introduced me to some of his family members, including his mother Nora. She had raised him as a single mother and she was very close to Andrew. She wasn't very warm towards me, but she wasn't rude either. The longer we were together the more we would meet her and she never warmed up to me. After a while, I realized she just didn't like me, and yes, I was disappointed, but I tried not to think about it too much. I had mentioned it to Andrew and he said that's just how his mom behaved with his past girlfriends and that I shouldn't worry. On July 9th, Andrew and I organized a small get-together with Nora, his Aunt Melinda, Chris, and Tiff, and my mother Cindy. My fiancé and I wanted to announce my pregnancy as I am 4 months pregnant. When we gathered everyone and told them, they were ecstatic and congratulated us except Nora. When we went to her, she hugged Andrew, congratulated him, and barely acknowledged me. I just walked away because I knew they would start talking and Nora excluded me from the conversation, and I went towards Andrew's cousins who I'm close to. We talked about the baby's gender, how I would decorate the baby's room and normal baby chatter. I was with the cousins, but I was still within earshot of Andrew and Nora and noticed that she was excitedly talking about how she would take such good care of the baby because she has always been a mom at heart. I'm not going to lie, I probably overthink, but that last comment pissed me off. She kept talking like I wasn't in the picture. By the end of the get-together, I was mad and waited until she left to go talk to Andrew. I told him I thought her comments were weird and that considering she's never liked me, it just feels like she thinks she's going to replace me. Andrew just said that she wants to be a hands-on grandmother as it's her first grandbaby and that it's not that deep. Yesterday, Tiff sent me a message asking me if I knew that Nora was telling her church people that she was being blessed and she would welcome a baby in her life because God could see how much love she had to give back, that she would name it after her grandmother, and just a bunch of nonsense. I told Andrew what I knew and he finally acknowledged how weird and creepy her lies were and he called her to set things straight. He told me she started crying and that he felt bad, but I feel like she's just plain crazy and is trying to guilt trip him. I sent her a message that as long as she can't accept that I am the child's mother and respect me, she won't be in the child's life. Update: basically after her scene on the phone with my fiancé, she spammed his phone with texts saying I'm the crazy hormonal pregnant lady, and then she went very quiet. He didn't block her, she just stopped texting. This morning she showed up, DH was at work and she knew that, claiming she deserved an explanation for how she was being treated, that she only had the baby's best interests at heart, and that trying to stop that would be going against my child and being a bad parent. I told her that I was done taking her attitude, that she wasn't the victim and that she was delusional for thinking she could treat me poorly and still be around my baby. Calling her delusional really upset her and I knew she would just start her victim rant, so I showed her out. I called DH before she would have a chance to do so and changed the entire narrative to make me the bad guy. I told him he either get his mother in check or I would be going away until the baby was born because I was not dealing with the stress of having a crazy woman around. He said he understood and he went home early. DH and his cousins are on my side. We're going to put her on an info diet. Unless she apologizes sincerely and there's a change in her behavior, she will not have access to my child and I will only let her know the bare minimum.
My girlfriend left me because I took the life of a home intruder. I never thought my relationship would end because I had to defend my home from a burglar. It's still painful to write about this, and I have to admit, I'm still extremely upset about the entire situation. So, this happened several months ago, and I've waited for everything with the police to settle down. Fortunately, no charges were filed against me, but that's a minor relief. A bit of background: I moved back to the city where I grew up after graduating from school, ready to start my career. Through new friends and social gatherings, I met a woman I'll call Sarah. She was fantastic, smart, funny, and we had a ton in common. I eventually asked her to be my girlfriend, and she said yes. Sarah was everything I wanted in a partner, but she had an extreme dislike of violence due to some troubling experiences from her past. This didn't seem like an issue, even though I'm a hobbyist marksman and carry a firearm for personal security. Sarah knew all about this and assured me it wouldn't be a problem. Everything was going great until her landlord kicked her out of her apartment. I gladly offered her a place to stay with me in my house, which I shared with 2 housemates. This brings us to the night everything changed. We'd been living together a couple of months when I woke up one night to a loud banging on the door. The clock read 2:36 a.m., and those numbers are now etched in my mind. I knew something was terribly wrong, so I told Sarah to lock herself in the bathroom and call the police. Then, I grabbed my firearm from the nightstand. Just a few seconds later, the door broke open, and I caught a glimpse of a man turning the corner in the hallway. My heart was pounding, but I knew I had to protect Sarah and myself. I blasted the intruder twice. He fell to the ground, gasping, and then he was gone. The police arrived about 15 minutes later, and their behavior was incredibly frustrating. They barged in, asking foolish questions, and seeming upset that I didn't tell them everything right away. After the coroner took away the intruder, I was left to clean the stains off the floor. It was a gruesome task, and the rest of the night was sleepless. In the following days, I struggled to come to terms with what happened. Although I felt no guilt over my actions, seeing the intruder as a threat rather than a person, the event shook me. Sarah was utterly distraught. She left to stay with her parents, and a few days later, she called me. After a long conversation, she told me she couldn't continue our relationship. The fact that I had unalived someone was too much for her to bear. I was devastated. It felt like I'd lost everything because of one terrible incident, one bad decision made by a stranger. My dreams of a future with Sarah were shattered. I even had plans to take her to the aquarium because she loved fish. All of that was gone. Now, I'm left picking up the pieces, trying to understand how life can change so suddenly. I understand why Sarah left, but it doesn't make the pain any less real. My fiancé has been making fun of me to his ex who he is still in love with. My fiancé, Dale, and I have been together for 5 years. We are as solid as I guess anyone thinks they are before something like this blindsides them. I am in total and complete shock. I'm just sitting here shaking, I can't even cry yet. Dale is at work right now. I haven't texted him or called him or anything at this point. When we got together he had just broken up with his college sweetheart. She was his first love. I was afraid I was rebound. He said that wasn't true, I believed him. Rest is history. Sorry as this is rushed and all over the place. Nothing makes sense in my head right now. I used his laptop about 2 hours ago to open his contacts list he has saved on there so I could get addresses for our wedding invites. Been telling him to get those to me for over a week, so I decided to do it. He keeps his contacts info on his email. When I opened his email, I saw an email on the very top of his inbox with the subject line Jen, not real name, how can I when? The subject line got cut off after that, so I couldn't see more without clicking. Jen is the name of his ex from college. I sat there for at least 10 minutes trying to decide if I should open it or not. I decided he should have nothing to hide, so I did it. Rest of the subject line was Jen, how can I when you still exist? The email was her replying to a string of emails between the two of them that has gone on for over a week. Long story short, Dale is still in love with Jen. He thinks about her constantly, he'll never find another woman like her. Even worse is that he makes fun of me and she laughs about it. One email she asks him why I don't make him happy and isn't he satisfied with me? I can't remember word for word, and I don't feel like reading it again, but he said something like she tries. She's just not good though, way too vanilla. I love her but the only way I can get off is when I think about effing you and how moist you'd get. I think every inch of my bed was soaked from your part, I have the biggest heart on just thinking about it. And then she answered with a bunch of lol-s and said she felt sorry for the poor girl. Another thing he said was that he made fun of me for having a large scar across my chest, onto my left breast, which has disfigured the it a bit. He said it looked like something out of Edward Scissorhands. That is almost too much to bear. He might as well have punched me in the gut. I was in an awful car accident when I was a teenager. I had a big piece of dashboard shatter and basically fly into my chest. I almost died. I've never been ashamed of the scar. It's like a constant reminder that I survived something a lot of people don't, and I should be grateful to be alive. The slight disfigurement of it doesn't bother me either. I've always had the attitude of if someone doesn't want me because of a boob, F them. But to hear him make fun of something he knows is a result of something so major in my life, my friend was thrown from the backseat and lost her life, is just. I have no words. The emails go on. Some are explicit. One she described how she just did herself while thinking about how he used to go down on her for hours. I'm assuming that these emails are just a small portion of their contact. The first email in the thread was Dale talking about how he doesn't think he can marry me and that he thinks about leaving me almost constantly. He said if she lived in this state he'd already have left me. It didn't sound like the first time they'd reconnected, so I'm guessing if I snooped I'd find texts too. I don't need to snoop further. I've seen all I need to. Obviously I'm not going to stay. Despite what he said about me, I'm pretty great and I know this. He said he misses backdoor. Apparently I'm too vanilla to give it to him. Thing is, I've tried to initiate that as I enjoy it and he told me he wasn't into that. So he lied, just to cast me in bad light. I'm so mad I just want to throw his stuff into a pile and light it on fire. But I won't, because I don't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing how much he hurt me. I'm not sure why I posted here. It's too fresh to talk to my friends and family. Should I just pack my stuff and leave with no explanation? Just ghost? I've got too much dignity to scream and cry in front of him. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I want comfort. What's the most hilarious prank you've seen someone pull off in high school? A couple of years ago, a guy pulled off one of the most hilarious pranks in high school history. He pretended to draw on his teacher's back during class and it caused a huge commotion. The principal was called in and he was so confused as to what was going on that he just stood there with his mouth open. Everyone in the room couldn't help but laugh at the situation. It was so damn funny. The guy got away with it too, which made it even better. It's still talked about today and will probably go down as one of the best pranks ever pulled off at that school.
My sister is infertile, and I'm glad she's suffering. I, 28 female, have an older sister, Angela, 30 female, whom I have never liked. She always had to compete with me, but never in a normal sibling rivalry way. Our entire life she always seemed resentful of my existence as the spotlight couldn't perpetually shine on her, so she had to step on everything I enjoyed. Per se, if I learned piano, she had to learn piano. If I excelled at a subject she suddenly became a scholar in it. If I told my mom I had a crush, Angela would be dating that boy in a week. I would always tell my parents when she did this, but I was disregarded, because sisters copy each other, and I can't gatekeep what she likes. She always monitored what activities I did and the clothes I wore, so she could outdo me. If I wore a flannel, Angela would come to school wearing an all-flannel dress. It was 2010 and that was peak fashion in our school. Though there was also more praise that followed Angela. Even if I took the initiative to begin the activity first, she was praised because she was better. My parents would miss work to attend her dance recitals, going to every single one because the world would stop if they missed it. However, I remember maybe 2 of mine they attended because they were stuck at work or were otherwise preoccupied. Angela reveled in this. She would make comments under her breath around our parents. Whenever our parents weren't around, she'd tell me how much she hated me and how I should stop trying because I would always come second to her. She also physically bullied me in school. Angela purposely tripped me, threw things at me, and hit me in the hallways on a nearly daily basis. The school had gotten involved multiple times, threatening Angela with suspension, and my parents fought it every time. My parents repeatedly told administration that this was a family matter and we were just bickering like normal sisters. She was never once reprimanded by either parent. Once Angela was caught impaling a cat on the school fence and my parents still defended her, saying this was normal teenage behavior. I often was in trouble as Angela would start crying, saying how she was being targeted by the school when I had antagonized her. After one of these occasions, Angela cut and bruised herself to prove to Dad that I was the aggressor. I became a pariah due to Angela's malicious rumors about me, so it was difficult for me to make friends. I resorted to only befriending people from other districts. Angela eventually made sure I had nobody by stalking them, befriending them, telling all my friends lies about how I was favored by our parents, and I constantly bullied and belittled her. She even stole boyfriends of mine doing this, convincing them I was horribly mean and an awful person that copied her every move. Once she catfished me on MySpace for 4 months, and baited me into sending her exposed pictures, which she proceeded to send my parents and everyone in school, including teachers. Later on, she told one of the boys I liked that those were actually her pictures and I had catfished her. The day of my high school graduation, my mom sat me down and told me Angela revealed the horrid abuse she'd suffered at my hand and I was no longer welcome in their home. After moving out the next day, my parents made very few attempts to communicate with me, only the occasional holiday and birthday text. All financial aid was also abruptly ended as soon as I stepped foot on campus. I met my now husband shortly after this, and we were married within a year. They did not feel inclined to attend my wedding or even congratulate me. I informed my parents when I had my first child 8 years ago as an opening, but they have made no attempt to contact or meet any of my 3 children. Best I know of Angela now, from what I've heard, is that she got married to one of the boyfriends she stole from me in high school, and she's been posting about her infertility issues and how she can't offer my parents their first grandbaby. After years of silence, I received a text at 8 this morning from my mother that said, "Hey, it's me, your mama. We haven't talked in a while and I surely miss you terribly. I wanted to let you know your sister just had a miscarriage earlier this week. Angie and Justin are struggling a lot right now. Send something a little sweet her way. I'm sure she'd appreciate it. Get back to me, I love you." I hate to say it, but I'm glad she's suffering. I'm glad she doesn't get to be a mother. If she tormented me for years, what would she do to a child? Especially a girl? I don't wish death on any baby, but I know in my heart that child would be damaged by her. I'm angry at my parents expecting me to have any sense of obligation to her. I don't even have any sense of obligation to them. They always believed her and dismissed me. I was always the problem child, and it's strange how my mother can be so warm to me when asking me to do something for my sister. Also the fact they cared more about my sister's now dead fetus than my actual children, who wonder why they only have one set of grandparents. I feel some sort of guilt for it, but I refuse to offer any condolences to my destructive narcissistic sister, who has been justified in her bad behavior since birth. Maybe this will change her, help her develop empathy or any type of emotion that isn't hate or vindictiveness. If that happens, I would be more than willing to offer support, but until then I feel nothing but a small inkling of happiness that she's hurt. Am I awful for this?
My mother-in-law thinks I cheated on my husband because we are having a girl, then lays hands on me at 8 months pregnant. There has not been a girl born on my husband's side of the family in more than 100 years. There's a huge running joke that the men in his family cannot produce female babies. Fast forward to our wedding night, where my mother-in-law looks me dead in the eye and says, "Now go make us our son. Don't you dare let us down." I nervously laughed and we departed. Over our honeymoon we got pregnant, with a baby girl. Everyone was so shocked when we announced it was a girl, and most of the family denied it up until the moment she was born. That's when the horrible comments started. Whenever my husband isn't around, mother-in-law and her family members will make snarky comments like, "I wonder where she got that nose." It's definitely not the husband's. Well, as it would happen, we are now expecting our second baby, and yep, it is another girl. I begged my husband not to tell the mother-in-law the gender when we found out, as I just wanted to enjoy a bit more of this pregnancy before she ruined it. I had decided to keep the mean comments his mother made to me about our first daughter to myself, as she's old and in poor health, and I felt guilty about potentially ruining their relationship when she probably doesn't have many years left to be around. Regardless, he insists on announcing it at our next visit, and we do exactly that. As soon as she heard it was another girl, tears welled in her eyes and she started shaking her head back and forth and sobbing. She then started yelling at me, called me a cheater, and demanded I get out of her house. The husband immediately stands up and starts yelling at her, asking what her problem is, and that she needs to apologize to me and watch her mouth in front of her grandkids. She says through broken wails, "Not ours. Not ours. Those girls are not ours. She's a cheater. A cheater. My son did not make those girls." I start crying hysterically and pick up my daughter, who is utterly confused as to why daddy is yelling at grandma and mommy is now crying. Mother-in-law then looks at me and starts yelling, "I let you get away with it the first time. I took you in his family. I allowed my son to believe he fathered that stupid girl, but I will not allow it again." Husband is now heated. He gets extremely mad and starts screaming at her that she is out of line and how dare she call his daughter names. He then goes on to say that we are leaving, and until she comes to her senses, she will never see any of us again. She tried to say something more, but he cuts her off and yells at her, "By the way, Mom, I love that little girl more than I ever loved you," as he is shuttling us out the door. I cried and broke down and told husband all the little comments she and her family have said to me when he's not around while we drive the 2 hours home. We went no contact for a few months and everything seemed to be going great. Then when I was nearing my due date, we decided to be the bigger person and reach out to her and offer her a chance to make things right. She whined and whines that she misses husband and granddaughter. We agreed to meet for dinner at their house after a few weeks for a proper talk and apology from her. We arrive, dinner is served and we are trying to make small talk when husband says, "Yeah, Mom. This has all been nice but we need to talk about what happened and the things you said last time we were here. I know, and you know that you owe my wife an apology." Mother-in-law then looks at husband and says, "Yes, do you have the paternity test?" I am not apologizing until I'm proven wrong, and we both know I'm right. You cannot be the father and the fact that you have now apparently made 2 girls is ridiculous. Husband, what the F is wrong with you? I start to cry and go to get up to grab my things and go to the car. Mother-in-law, "Oh no you don't." She shoots up, rounds the table and grabs my shirt, then proceeds to scream at me, "How dare you try to run away from this? You're a cheater and you need to own up to this problem." Husband screams at her to get her hands off of me, and starts to make his way towards us. She then decides that I cannot be allowed to leave at any cost with her son. She slaps me across my face. Husband then gets in between me and his mom and starts to scream at her. Husband is furious and I'm crying hysterically. He grabs my hand and we are making our way to the door when mother-in-law grabs a snow globe from a shelf and throws it directly at me. It connects me in the back of my head. I fell to my knees from the pain and before husband can put together what just happened, she is grabbing anything she can find to throw in my direction. I'm on my knees on the ground holding my head with one hand and my belly with the other. Husband is screaming at the top of his lungs for her to stop and she proceeds to try to get close enough to kick me. Thankfully, she is old and in bad health so she loses momentum quickly and as a last resort husband pushes his mom and she falls back into a shelf by the front door and he rushes me out. He drives me to the hospital and I end up getting 6 stitches in my head and being monitored in hospital for 4 days. The baby ended up being fine, and the hospital demanded we file a police report. We find out that when husband pushed his mom into the shelf she ended up breaking 2 fingers and is claiming the excessive force hurt her neck very badly. Cops showed up and took our side of the story and compared our own report that we filed once at the hospital. They told us that mother-in-law is demanding to press charges against husband for assault, while we are pressing charges against her. So then my husband gets arrested but then quickly released after father-in-law is forced to tell the truth and mother-in-law then gets arrested. Father-in-law is now begging us to drop the charges as no one was hurt and that we are being cruel to lock up an elderly woman. We are currently at home waiting for baby number 2 to arrive. I am on a strict bed rest order and husband has taken the week off of work to help pamper me and take care of our first daughter. I asked husband if once baby number 2 arrives, we get paternity tests for both girls to send to his mom in jail, as a huge FU. He thinks it's a hilarious idea and thinks we should also make copies and send them to all the relatives who were entertaining his mom's craziness, along with a written letter saying goodbye. That none of them will ever see us or his daughters again, and that he hopes they're all happy knowing that they've ruined any chance they had to have a relationship with him, or our children ever again. I served the same family twice in one day. My last workplace, where I used to make good money, shut down unexpectedly. The owner had a habit of opening and closing restaurants all the time, and this time we got kicked out due to eviction. So, I started a new job, but I needed to hustle to match my previous earnings. Luckily, they allowed me to pick up shifts at another restaurant, so now I'm working 5 double shifts a week between these 2 places. In the morning, I served this super nice family at my first job, and it was their first time there. Although they didn't spend a ton of money, they left a generous tip, and we had a great time together. Fast forward to my second restaurant gig. Another family got seated, and a couple of them were wearing outfits that caught my eye. At first, I thought, why are they always wearing the same clothes every time I serve them? I assumed I recognized them from that restaurant and cheerfully welcomed them back. But here's where it gets interesting. Turns out, I had served them just 7 hours earlier at my morning job. Keep in mind, there are hundreds of restaurants in this area. So, I greeted them with a smile and they burst into laughter, saying, "Wait, didn't we have lunch with you earlier today?" It suddenly clicked, and I realized why they were in the same outfits. They had no idea our restaurants were part of the same small, locally owned restaurant group with 4 different places, each with its own name and style. The mom was like, "This is crazy. We rarely eat out, and definitely not twice in the same day. How on earth are you here? How did we get the same server twice in a day at different places?" I explained the situation, how these sister restaurants were only about 5 miles apart, and that I was working at 2 of them. It turned out to be such an unusual and amusing coincidence. We shared a few more laughs, and once again, they left me a really nice tip. I gave my little brother a better birthday than my mom ever could have. Growing up, I never had the best birthday parties or the most expensive gifts, but I had something better: family. My dad worked long hours at a factory job while my mom stayed home to take care of me and my 2 siblings. We never had a lot of money, so we wore hand-me-downs and went without fancy vacations or going out to eat. But that was okay, because we had each other. When I got older and started making my own money, I realized just how much my parents had sacrificed for us. I wanted to do something for them, to give them the things they had never had growing up. So last year, I surprised them with a trip to Hawaii. Seeing the look on their faces when I told them was priceless. It's easy to get caught up in our own desires and forget about others, but in the end, it's what really matters. That's what I learned when I read that post on Reddit about someone who gave their little brother a better birthday than their mom ever could have. It was a reminder to me that no matter how small or insignificant something may seem, It can make a huge difference in someone's life. This year, I decided to do something special for my little brother's birthday. I wanted to give him something that my parents never had the chance to give me. So I took him on a surprise trip to Disneyland. We stayed in a nice hotel, ate at all the best restaurants, and went to all the best attractions. His face lit up when he saw the castle. It was a moment I will never forget. Giving back to others is one of the most rewarding experiences, and I'm so glad I was able to give my little brother a birthday he will never forget. Now I'm looking forward to seeing what other surprises I can come up with to make my family's lives a little bit brighter. I was fired from my job after 5 days for being too attractive and tempting. I was born to a lower-class family and we grew up without much on the table. As I grew older I became obsessed with the grind and was desperate for a job. After working at a pool for 6 summers I decided not to come back out of pride because the pool's board of directors fired the management team I loved. I also wanted more than $9 an hour to afford things. So that brought me to Craigslist and I found a job close to home as a prep cook in a kitchen. I was a junior in college making $12 an hour. I emailed them and soon enough Ted invited me for an interview. We hit it off professionally and he offered me the job on the spot. As I was about to leave he said, "Oh, by the way, the location is in a girls' sleepaway camp, that's not a problem, is it?" And I said I had no problem with it. So the next week I met with Ted and the head chef there. We did a walkthrough of all my duties and toured the kitchen and walk-in facilities as well as the general camp area. While I was in the kitchen talking to the chef, the director of the camp came in. She seemed disappointed to see me for some reason. I am a friendly guy and don't have any problems with anyone. But I have to say this was one of the worst first impressions I ever had. I could physically feel her dislike me and that I was picked for this job. Later that day Ted pulled me aside and instructed me that I was not to talk to any of the girls and was not to even look at them. It was obvious that the camp director had a word with them about me. Saturday morning comes and it's my first day. I enjoyed my work and the person I was working with. Chef and I became like master and student with us building a friendship outside work. I did good and the girls told the chef they loved our food. I just nodded along doing as I was told. Why was the chef, who was literally 60, allowed to have appropriate full conversations with these college girls but I wasn't? If anything I thought that was more weird. I felt excluded, but I kept my head down and did the job best I could. On Thursday evening I was cleaning my meat slicer and some girls had a speaker on in the kitchen. Their song choice was Get Low by Lil Jon and the East Side Boys. The opening came on and I just blurted out, "Yo, this was my jam in 2003," and I realized I had acknowledged the girls. These were the only words I said to them in the whole 5 days and it wasn't even direct. They didn't say anything and it almost felt like they were told not to talk to me either. I couldn't believe that my one statement would be the end of me. It's July 4th weekend. I finally was getting off Saturday after I had worked 50 hours in 5 days. I arrived at the camp and I saw Ted sitting out front. He was not on location any other day, so his presence was a surprise. He looked a little distraught. I get out of my car and he quickly approaches me. He says, "Let's have a walk." We walk towards a secluded area and he says, "Man, I'm sorry but the camp's board of directors heard that an attractive college-aged male was working in the kitchen and they decided they didn't want someone like you working there. At the end of the day, it isn't up to us." And just like that, I was unemployed. I went home and packed a bag and I decided I would surprise my family down the Jersey Shore where they were at our family friend's large seaside second home. I ended up going back to work at the pool. They took me back at a slight raise and I was grateful they did. At the time I wanted to pursue legal action because surely this is discrimination. I talked to lawyers who said I pretty much have no case because I hadn't worked there that long, and one even said he heard of a case in Iowa or something where a girl was fired for being too hot and the court sided with the company. Looking back now it was probably the best thing. I put myself in their shoes and if I were running a camp meant to be for girls, I wouldn't want a muscular, tall, dark and handsome president working there. Am I the a-hole for breaking up with my pregnant girlfriend because I don't want to be a father? I 25M had been with my now ex 23F for a little over 3 months. I always made sure we used lots of precaution when having intimacy. She was on birth control and I always used condoms. I wanted to avoid a child. I have known for a long time that I do not want children. I find them annoying and they would severely limit my ability to do the things I enjoy. Unfortunately for me, my ex didn't have her period when she was supposed to and it turns out she's now pregnant. The first thing I did was suggest an abortion. We don't live in a state where it's legal, so I offered to pay for her flight and hotel and told her I'd be happy to come with her to get it done. I have a stable job and make good money, so it wouldn't be too much of a hit for me. She works as a receptionist and doesn't make a lot, so I figured it would be better for me to pay. That's when she told me she was hoping to keep it and that she wanted me to help her raise the kid as its father. I have no intention of being a father. Beyond just my dislike of children, I'm not ready for that. I made it very clear that I didn't want the baby, but she kept insisting that I'd have a change of heart once it's born and to just try it out. After a long exchange I told her that if she intended to keep the baby I would not act as a father. I broke up with her and told her that I would pay child support once it's born, but that I expect her to respect my wishes and keep the child away from me. Since then she's been frantically texting me, begging me to come back and telling me she'd forgive me. She sent me voicemails crying, "It does hurt to see, but I haven't responded." The other day she texted me saying how she can't raise the kid alone and how I'm basically forcing her to get the abortion just by leaving. She called me an asshole, an abuser, and a sexist. She ended the text begging me to talk again. I certainly feel shitty. I really liked her and we had a good relationship before this, but I just don't want to be a father. I'm already bitter about the fact that I'll have to pay child support for 18 years, which will somewhat limit me financially. I also feel it isn't right for a parent who doesn't want their child to be involved. I just end up taking the pent-up anger and bitterness out on the child who is ultimately innocent, which I feel isn't right. I tried to get a vasectomy. My ex is trying to baby trap me. My ex-partner and I are both female. We were together for several years and discussed having a child, mainly in the heat of the moment. I agreed to do it one time so she would let me eat it from the back because I really needed it that day. We agreed to use one of our eggs and go through the route of a licensed clinic with sperm donation. We had a time frame in mind of when to start it, so we had enough time to save up, etc. Anyway, my partner decided she did not want to go down this route and wait, and decided to post on social media asking seriously for sperm donation to do an at-home insemination with a turkey baster. She mentioned it but as a joke to me, and I told her that was a bad idea due to several risks and the potential for the donor to want to be in the child's life. I assumed it was a joke but made it clear I would not support it. Well, against my wishes, she did it. She didn't tell me until after she had been in contact with a random man, got the donation and had a positive pregnancy test. I told her I did not want anything to do with the child and broke up with her and subsequently moved out. She is about 5 months pregnant now and is harassing me, demanding me to be involved with the child, especially financially, as well as sending me videos of her in bed with another woman, some of which, I must admit, did make me reconsider my decision. She has admitted in text that she concocted getting pregnant without my consent, and I have evidence of me saying I never agreed to it, which she has also admitted. I have taken screenshots of these exchanges, but I'm stumped in general. I do not want to be a parent to this child, so can I legally be forced to? Update: my ex is trying to baby trap me. Several months ago, I made a post about my ex-partner who deliberately got herself pregnant via an anonymous donor rather than through a clinic, as we are both female. My ex initially was harassing me with texts and messages demanding that I be involved with the child. I had screenshots of her admitting she got pregnant behind my back, so I made sure to keep them before I blocked her on everything. I even changed all my privacy settings on social media. After I moved out, I moved back in with my parents, who were very understanding. I got my ex's family harassing me and I decided I didn't want to live in the same city as them all anymore. I didn't want to, but I spoke to my work and asked if there were any openings literally anywhere else in England, and there was. I was just so done with everything that I took the opportunity to move away, and I did. My parents helped me move in and I found a lovely little one-bedroom flat that is near a river. I live in a small town now about 4 hours away, and as much as I thought I'd hate it, I'm beginning to enjoy it. I did block all of my ex's family, but they kept making multiple accounts to contact me. The last contact was about 2 weeks ago, stating my ex has given birth to a baby girl. Apparently the donor is not interested in being a father and my ex is all on her own and needs some help and support. Not my problem. I'm just over the whole situation, and it was extreme, but I just decided to delete all social media. I informed my friends and family, and I also changed my number and gave that out to trusted people. I guess it's a pretty boring update. New job. New flat. I didn't expect to be single after 8 years, but what can you do? I think I might give a dating app a try, as I've been starving to have my face in some lady. Has anyone else been utterly heartbroken and lost? How did you recover? I, 21F, was in a committed relationship with my boyfriend, 23M, for almost a year. He meant the world to me, and we were best friends who had plans for a future together. However, everything changed when he went on a trip and told me that he couldn't be in a relationship right now. To be honest, I had sensed something was off for the past month. He had been distant, and it was no surprise when he finally brought up the topic. Our conversation about it felt strange and confusing. He expressed his love for me, calling me his soulmate, but explained that being apart after graduating made him realize he needed to work on his own life before fully committing to me. He assured me there wasn't someone else and that he wasn't doing this just to be single. He genuinely wanted me, but felt lost in his own journey. Strangely, even after discussing such a heartbreaking decision, we couldn't hang up the phone for hours, as we found ourselves joking and laughing together. We both agreed to a period of no contact and being single, with the plan to see each other and assess our feelings after his return from the trip, which will be in about a month. I'm struggling with this arrangement because I worry it's unfair to me. It feels like agreeing to a break is simply giving him the freedom to be single during his trip, only to come back to me afterward. Additionally, I doubt whether he will truly figure things out in a month away to be able to commit to me or even want to, but I reluctantly agreed, driven by my intense love for him. During this time, I am also taking the opportunity to be single and focus on finding myself, as I have been feeling somewhat lost in life recently. I understand that if we do meet after his trip, I hold just as much power to decide whether I want to continue the relationship or not. I am feeling incredibly hurt and lost right now. We were so committed before he left, the best of friends who wanted nothing more than to be by each other's side. We supported one another in our personal journeys and in achieving our goals. I believe him when he says he feels lost. Even before his trip, he struggled with figuring out his future and his life. He seemed genuinely honest when expressing his love for me. Still, the pain and heartbreak I feel are overwhelming. As he grew distant, I spiraled downwards, witnessing signs that he wasn't as committed to our relationship. Yet, I held on to hope. It wasn't until I confronted him that he confessed his true feelings. I don't know how to process this or what to do. I've never felt so shattered before. He was the only person I've ever loved so deeply and felt secure with. It's incredibly difficult to accept. Men of Reddit, what is the male equivalent of flowers as a gift? When me and my wife were just starting out, I was talking to her on my way home from work about how I was so tired I was probably gonna skip dinner cause I didn't want to cook and didn't have the money to eat out. I don't know when she did it, but when I got home, 2 minutes later a pizza guy showed up with my favorite pizza. Inside the box said something like, "I know it's not that healthy, but it's better than not eating." No one had ever done something like that for me before. Not just the gift of food, But that it was because she didn't want me to skip a meal either. She cared about my well-being.
My ridiculous mother-in-law doesn't like me but is trying to look like me. My husband hugged her from behind and she liked it. My mother-in-law is not my favorite person because she has no boundaries, she's overbearing, she's controlling and she's rude. I have no respect for her because she also disrespects me and my relationship with her son. I've lost any patience or energy I had when it came to my mother-in-law. I do not talk with her but I can be civil when I see her at birthdays, weddings, and so on. I greet her, we engage in small talk, and that's it. There's this one event that still gets to me, though. After I greeted mother-in-law and father-in-law at a dinner party at their house, I sat on my husband's lap because there weren't enough chairs in the area that our group was sitting in. I think this is what triggered mother-in-law because she hates when her grown SS son is taken advantage of by me or inconvenienced because of my selfish actions. At some point, I went to use the toilet and mother-in-law took that chance to corner me. She yelled at me that I was being inappropriate with her son and that she shouldn't have to sit there and watch me be on his lap because it was gross. Unfortunately for her, my husband heard some of what she was saying because he had come to give me my phone. He immediately started defending me, saying that she was being ridiculous because we're husband and wife, this is just what normal married couples do. She kept interrupting him to say that's not what happened and even tried to victimize herself. I've never seen him stand up to his mother like that. I couldn't believe it because he's a very chill guy. He even told her to shut up and let him finish. Mother-in-law tried to backpedal, saying that she was sorry but my husband said nope. He heard what really happened and knew that if he hadn't come when he did, she would have kept saying horrible things to me until I cried. Mother-in-law actually tried to cry but he kept saying that all her concerns were absurd and that what she did to me was uncalled for. When he was done talking, mother-in-law tried to apologize to me, but I told her to keep it since she's never going to change how she behaves towards me. I went back to the dining table and mother-in-law came over to apologize again for her behavior and I accepted because she seemed genuinely sorry. My husband told her he wouldn't accept it until he saw significant changes in her behavior. Mother-in-law maybe heard something else because since then, she slowly started turning into me. I didn't notice her change at first until my sister-in-law pointed out how mother-in-law was dressing like me. I didn't think anything of it because my style of dressing is basic. But my mother-in-law also started wearing similar perfume and jewelry to mine. Then she changed her hair to look exactly like mine, the same color and style. Mind you, I'm blonde and she had really dark hair and she swore she would never dye her hair before. She even used to make fun of my blonde hair because it was really ugly and her hair color was superior. So her changing it now was really suspicious. My husband even noticed this change in her hair and she told him it was a common hairstyle and that all the moms were going blonde now. She said that she just wanted to feel younger. The next thing she changed was what she called my husband. She started calling him love and I felt that was gross because I use it when I'm flirting with him. She knows that since she has a problem with boundaries. I have no idea what she's going to change next. My sister says she'll probably start talking like me now or unalive me and take over my life. It's definitely weird. She even stands and behaves like me. My husband even said he hugged her because he thought she was me from the back. She was so happy and asked him to do it more often.
Am I the jerk for telling my grandpa he's not the reason why I'm going to college? I, 17 male, am of mixed race. My mom, 35 female, is white and my dad, 36 male, is a black Mexican. My grandfather, 63 male, never liked my dad and back when my parents were just dating he would tell my mom stuff like I'm not racist but you have to ask what does a guy like him want with a girl like you? He wants to marry you for a green card etc. When mom got pregnant, grandpa stopped talking to her and demanded she leave his house. She decided to move in with my dad, get married and whatnot. My parents have always worked hard to give me a good life, and always encouraged me academically. They always helped with my homework, were really active in my schools, my mom even started attending mass at my dad's church so I would have a higher chance of getting a scholarship at a private Catholic school. I did end up going there. Despite never needing my grandpa, my parents did attempt to build a connection between me and him. They'd invite him to my B-days and to Christmas but he never came, my grandma would always come. The plague changed things. My grandma died and I guess the isolation made grandpa rethink his life choices because he slowly attempted to reconnect with us. He never addressed being racist but has apologized for prematurely judging my dad. Even though he has gotten closer to us, we are not a tight-knit grandpa-grandson duo. I was already 14 when he decided to reach out, so I think it would be naive to think we would be like Little Red Riding Hood and her grandma at that point. Last year, I took the SAT for the first time and I got a 1,450. My counselor told me that this score combined with my grades and my class rank meant that I was pretty much safe to apply almost anywhere. However, if it was something that interested me I could try retaking the SAT because if I got a 1,500 we could be talking Ivy League chances then. When I shared this with my family, my grandpa promptly offered to pay for a SAT prep course. I took the course, got a higher score, applied to schools, and eventually got a full ride to an Ivy school where I'll start in the fall. Yesterday, my grandpa and I went out and met some of his friends and he was telling them about my future college plans and bragged that if it wasn't for him paying for my course I would not be OMW to school in the fall. I corrected him and said that while the course helped it was my parents' hard work that got me where I am, as they were the ones who steered me towards academia anyways. He got mad at me and he now says I'm ungrateful. But I don't think it's fair of him to take credit, when it wasn't him who was there for me throughout my school journey. He was only there for the very end. But I recognized that while I would have gotten into college regardless, perhaps it would not be a full ride at a super elite school, so he did technically help.
How did you first realize you were actually pretty? As a reformed ugly girl, when someone found me attractive for the first time, I nearly had an aneurysm because I was so used to getting weird looks if I stepped too close to someone. Being unattractive is an automatic ticket to get bullied constantly, and don't even think about being fat because it'll make it 10 times worse. Everyone found my existence hilarious, and it didn't help that I tried to sit down in class, and the chair split in half. My entire class started laughing, and my teacher gave me a dirty look and asked me to make sure I didn't disrupt the class by doing things I knew my body couldn't support. For weeks after that, my classmates would fall off their chairs when I walked by, and every single time, my teacher shook her head at me as if I was creating a disruption. Anytime I tried to sit down, people would start praying loudly that I wouldn't murder another defenseless chair. I was never called by my actual name after that. To them, I was a pig, a whale, an elephant. I was even told I resembled a fictional sky bison named Appa because I was so big back that I carried 5 people on my back. This was all because I had double chins, 30 pounds too fat, and an acne-covered face. My hair couldn't even make up for my face because it was frizzy and in a small bob cut that only made my face look rounder. My thighs were also huge, and I remember looking at the much skinnier, prettier girls with their thigh gaps, wishing I could have that. Instead, I was doomed to wear baggy sweatpants wherever I went, to try and hide my very obvious fatness. I didn't even have any friends because being around me meant you'd be guaranteed to be made fun of. One time, I even tried to learn how to do nails so people would want to talk to me, but I quickly realized that my nails were too brittle to even support acrylics. I couldn't even try to find something as simple as purple nails in common with other girls. And, if things couldn't get worse, my English teacher teamed pairs in my class to work on an assignment, and the guy I was teamed up with, who was also my crush, was almost crying his eyes out, saying that he'd rather quit school than work with a fatso like her. I thought I could escape the bullying once I went to college, but things weren't any better there. My first year of college was a lonely experience because nobody wanted to be friends with me. They looked genuinely grossed out whenever I talked to them and kept their distance from me. In high school, I was treated like garbage and got bullied, and in college, I was invisible. During summer break, I decided to finally make a change because I was tired of being excluded and being made to feel worthless. To be honest, I wanted an easy way out. I wanted to go back to school looking unrecognizable, and I wanted to feel better about myself quickly. I started working out, taking Avi College-genic Elite, and working on my diet. Soon everything fell into place. I wasn't getting my nightly cravings like I used to or eating huge portions of food either. Instead, I got into the habit of knowing when to stop eating, and honestly, I just wasn't as hungry anymore. Since my days weren't filled with stuffing my face, and the pills sped up my metabolism, it became a lot easier to lose weight. In 6 months, I lost my body fat, gained curves from hitting the gym, my acne cleared up, and my hair had gone from my chin and down to my shoulders and was shinier than I'd ever seen it. I found myself staring at myself in the mirror being happy about what I looked like now. I even had to buy new clothes because my old ones were way too baggy on me, and that's when I got my first taste of pretty privilege. I entered the mall in a sweatshirt and hoodie, left a store in a slim dress, and all of a sudden, everyone's eyes were on me, and for the right reasons. I even was able to get my first pair of acrylics because my nail beds were strong enough. When I went to get something to eat after shopping all day, the guy behind the counter was actually flirting with me and asking for my number. This was the first time a guy had ever shown interest in me. He even threw in a free drink just because he thought I was pretty. And when I left the mall, a guy held the door open for me. Usually, guys slam doors in my face. When I got back home, I decided to post some pictures on Instagram to show off my body, and the amount of people that met me was insane. So many guys from high school texted me asking how I was and if we could meet up because they would love to catch up. My phone was blowing up with all kinds of messages and I felt like a celebrity. All these people being interested in talking to me was so new and exciting. That whole day was a phenomenon to me, and I questioned if I was living in an alternate reality. And the craziest part was that this became my life on a day-to-day basis. If I had known just how deep pretty privilege went, I would have gotten skinny and pretty a lot sooner. Edit. Since everyone is asking, the workout routines I used all came from Lily Sabri. I took Obvi Elite pills to suppress my appetite and help my hair grow, and to make sure I was sticking to my diet, I just tracked all my meals on MyFitnessPal.
Am I the a-hole for telling my husband's kids that my house isn't their family home, and it's not my fault their mom lost theirs? I married my husband 2 years ago. He has 2 kids over the age of 20. He had a very nasty divorce from their mom, that was fought out over the course of years. Part of the reason for the marriage ending was she had a drug problem and blew through their savings and was running up CCs he didn't know about to pay for it. The divorce finalized when the youngest was 16. She wanted the house in the divorce, which was a big part of the fight. She ended up getting it. She immediately moved in her addict boyfriend and another couple they used with, and the house ended up getting destroyed and falling into foreclosure, and they then proceeded to squat in it and had to be forcibly removed. Because my husband and his ex ended up also having to file bankruptcy, he had been living in a friend's basement when I met him due to his credit being wrecked. Fast forward, we are married, he moves into my house, got a prenuptial agreement, he can't be on the mortgage due to his credit anyways, his ex and kids are living with grandparents. His kids and ex don't like me, they refer to me as that CT, but at this point they are all adults, so I'm not going to force things with them. Grandparents recently had to sell their home and they are now living with their mom's friends. They asked if they could move in with us and I said no. Both got angry and started telling me that this was their dad's home, and that makes this their family home too, and it wasn't up to me if they could live there or not. They started spouting off every insult they could think of. I interrupted them and told them it in fact was not their family home, and if they were looking for their family home, they need to go talk to their mom, because she chopped it up and put it up her nose, and that wasn't my problem. A huge part of the reason I don't want them here is that their mom has since squatted multiple places, forcing roommates to have to threaten her with eviction to get her out, and basically told the last one she would leave for a certain amount of money. The kids and her are very close, and I don't want that happening in my house. We also have reason to believe the oldest may be using. I stole and beat off into my coworker's panties. I am married but in a dead bedroom situation. I work at a large company with a beautiful coworker in an office just down the hall. We flirt a lot and are pretty comfortable and close with each other, but we have never done anything that could be thought of as physical cheating. Last year she had an affair with a guy, and she felt comfortable enough with me to share this fact. I've had my share of fantasies where she and I hook up, so knowing she cheated on her husband made it even hotter for me. I was in her office while she was out of the office for a vacation, trying to locate a file she told me she had on her desk if I needed to double check something. While searching for it, I stumbled across a shoebox in her drawer. Inside the box was a pair of panties, hot lingerie, and a thumb drive. I'm not a good person, so I also snooped and checked out the thumb drive. The underwear and lingerie were what she wore the night she cheated on her husband, and her naughty photos of the event were on the thumb drive. This got my dingling hard instantly. I was so wrapped up in it that I shut my office door, turned out the lights, and crawled under my desk to masturbate into her panties. I then put the panties back in the box and the thumb drive, not before making a copy of the photos for myself, and put it all back in the drawer where I found it. I'm not a good person, but if my wife would just F me, maybe I wouldn't have these issues. He demands free sports cars. Alright, so I'm sure most of us have been there, late teens/early 20s and sowing those oats as the boomers called it. A particularly fine-looking dance partner comes along and all of a sudden you go from doing the waltz with half the town to looking like Tom when he sees the female cat in Tom and Jerry. This wildly attractive and intelligent person has you hook, line and sinker and you're smitten completely. You change paths and start talking about how you're gonna start spending weekends at Home Depot and on DIY projects and your home has furniture for the first time in your life since leaving the nest. Well, here is where this fabulous fairy tale takes a hard left turn right into oncoming traffic. The apple of our eye, you see, has hatched a plan that is, if I have a baby, he is stuck with me. And thus a family is born. Replacing her own oral contraceptives with placebos and diligently taking them in front of you. But wait, this is when everything goes to hell and you're now single again, seeing the kid you were truly tricked into having every other weekend and trying to foster the best relationship imaginable. Eventually it becomes every other weekend and you spend all the time not with your little guy slaving away at work, playing your odds and everything's coming up Millhouse. 15 years pass and you've managed to go from a pizza delivery boy who also bartends a few nights a week to a man who owns 3 very successful businesses as well as other assets. Life is good. Another dance partner has come along and shown you the proper moves for a long-lasting duet. This, friends, brings us to present day as our best mistake in life has turned 17 and you couldn't be more proud of that not so little sucker as he has grown into such an incredible youngin' you couldn't have dreamt of a better relationship or son. Your son now has a brother that is 14 months younger than him. Your old dirty dancing partner hasn't fared so well in such an open capitalist market and is still living in a lower middle class lifestyle. The shining star of your life is spent every weekend and any night he could after school since he was 12 restoring his first car from just a shell in a junkyard, and it's finally time to head on down to the DMV for tags, title and a call to dad's insurance. It's the best day of both of your lives as you pull back into the shop so he can bring the fruits of his labor home with him and never ride the bus to school again. But there is a nasty storm on the horizon. Now we're up to our entitled kid and our entitled ex's role in this story. We pull into the driveway, the prodigal son in his dreamboat of a 1993 Mazda RX-7. The engine quickly braps away as the 2.0 liters 3-rotor is running better than Usain Bolt after hearing "Release the Cheetahs." Dad follows into the driveway of X's house in his 2005 Mitsubishi Lancer. Cars are parked and we walk for the door, play punching each other in the arm as we laugh and chat from pure excitement. As Dad's foot hits the porch, the front door bursts open and Ek flies out the door, shoulder checking his brother as he runs toward the shiny red car in the driveway. Our entitled ex of the story, who's Ek and the chosen son's mother, immediately walks out and looks at the 2 cars in the driveway, and you can tell by the look on her face something must smell horrible within the walls of your long-forgotten castle. Dialogue ensues. X equals entitled X, Ek equals entitled kid, me equals well, your narrator, PS equals our lovable protagonist of the story, PS, Mom. Remember the car I told you Dad and I have been building forever? It's finally done and we got tags on it and you don't ever have to worry about driving me anywhere now. X, looking directly at our humble knight, why would you give him this car? It's nicer than mine? How much did it cost? You better have another one for Ek. Ek, awesome. When will mine be here? Me, well wait. I have one child. He chose this car when he was 11 and we spent almost 2 years finding one to restore. PS spent almost all of his free time building this car with his bare hands while I helped and guided him. Ek was even invited to come hang out at the shop with his brother anytime if he wanted to, but has never once came. Ek, can I get a GTR? I really like that silver one from Fast and Furious. X, you know, I'm still driving the Miata you bought me in 2005. I need a new car too. PS give me your keys, you're going to be driving my car while I take the new one. PS, the F \CK you or me and X simultaneously, me watch your mouth please X, How dare you speak to me that way, now you'll be driving nothing. Eck, I'll take the Miata until Whip Solo gets my GTR if PS isn't going to be driving it. Me, PS's car legally belongs to me and is only insured for him or I to drive it. No one will drive PS's car unless it is him or I. No one. Understand? X, well you better take me to local BMW dealer and get me at least a used 4 Series if you think I'm letting PS drive this car. PS, finally collecting his thoughts, Mom, Dad is an ex-dad, he's not your husband and I can't remember a time when he was. That's my car I built with my own hands, tearing up at this point, and I'll just sell it before Dad buys you a new car. Me, proud, concerned and all around befuddled from these events, PS, go pack a bag or 2 of all your important stuff, you can drive to school from my house now so it's no big deal. X screamed an absolute boatload of insults, curse words and demands as we got into our cars and has been texting me non-stop ever since. This happened on Sunday. X showed up at my shop last night and wanted to learn the ropes. I had to inform X that I wasn't going to be buying him a car, but if he wanted to learn mechanics I'd be happy to teach him, and when he did get a car I'm sure both I and his brother would help him do any modifications he'd like to it and I'd also get him parts at wholesale price, 35 to 50% off typically. X immediately screamed this is bullsh_t, kicked in the door of a 2015 Mustang we had in for a cam job denting it all to hell and running out of my shop. I've sent an officer to formally trespass X from my business and filed a police report on X to make the phone calls/texts end. So far no charges have been filed. I decided to tell this story with a bit of jest as if I didn't have dropped an F-bomb every 4th word while typing this. If I'm in some bizarro world where I'm the entitled douche here, feel free to roast me. I'll end by saying my ex had seen our son's car about a week after we fished it out of the junkyard and it literally looked like that scene in the first Fast and the Furious with the Supra on the back of the tow truck. 2JZ no poop. Update, am I the a-hole for pouring my husband's sweet tea down the drain and marching out? Well, I've left my husband, and it really wasn't over this one incident, but really a buildup of many. Before I even made the post, I wasn't completely blind to what he had been doing in terms of control. As weird as it seems, sometimes I just forget I am an adult and I don't have to just say yes sir and listen to any man that's older than me. I'm an adult now, I make my own rules. I feel sick saying this, but I realize I had been viewing him as a parental figure and not a partner. It kind of makes my stomach twist to even type that, but that is what it is. I don't really want to analyze it right now, it's too gross. I'm honestly going through a really tough grieving time right now. I feel like such a failure. What's worse is that he does not care in the least. When I called him to tell him I was leaving, he said okay, let me know when you want to grab your stuff, we can have you moved out ASAP. And that was it. That was all he said before he hung up the phone. I'm really hurting. I loved him so much, and I think part of me just wanted to see if he was willing to fight for me and apologize. He was not, so that's that. But, although I'm hurting, I feel free. My mom has welcomed me back, she's so happy I am divorcing him. I got together with my friends who he wouldn't let me see. I watched TV shows he told me were too childish, and I've been wearing ugly sweatpants and oversized shirts that he always said made me look like a man. So thank you, all of you. I got a wake-up call I desperately needed. I don't even want to be a housewife. I never wanted that for me, no hate on anyone who does. Honestly guys, it was hard and lonely work. I am going to get my RN, and then move on to my master's. You've all encouraged me in the best way possible. What's the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for you? When I was 12 years old, a kid from Delaware moved to my small town in rural Maryland. His name was Jack. He was cute and funny and I instantly had a crush on him, but he did not like me in that way. He was never mean or anything and we had classes together but I wasn't an object of his affection. 2 other girls, named Tanya and Yvette, caught his eye and I stood by on the sidelines, rather sad that none of his attention was ever thrown my way. I remember him slow dancing with Yvette at the 7th grade dance and wishing it was me. The song playing was True by Spandau Ballet. Anyway, fast forward, and I was in my mid-30s in the ER in a Montgomery County hospital. I had chronic pelvic pain and after I was admitted to the ER, I laid on the gurney behind a curtain and waited to see the doctor. When the doctor arrived, pulling back the fabric barrier, I was shocked to see that it was him. Now, please understand that I have a knack for recalling faces. In fact, I've recognized people from when I was in kindergarten but never say anything to them because I know they won't remember me. I didn't tell him I recognized him, and I was in a lot of pain, so I just thought, oh, that's Jack, how strange. He was still handsome. He was kind and attentive and then scheduled for me to have a CT scan. Finally, after he finished examining me, he said, "You look familiar." I lied and said I just had that kind of face. What was I supposed to say? I had a crush on you when I was 12? I was diagnosed as having ovarian cysts which had to be removed. Another doctor performed the surgery the next day. A month later I ran into Jack again at a Starbucks downtown. He was walking in and I was walking out, and we bumped into each other. He asked how I was doing and we chatted for an hour. Then at the end of our conversation he asked me out on a date which surprised me and I accepted. During our date, he again mentioned that I looked familiar and I confessed that we went to junior high together. I left out the part about the crush. He stared at me for a moment as it clicked, wow, now I remember you. After we dated for a month, I confessed about my unrequited crush in his Spandau Ballet slow dance with Yvette. He kissed me and said he barely remembered that dance or Yvette for that matter, but he remembered my face after all these years and that had to mean something. A year later he proposed and on bended knee, he said, "A long time ago, you gave me your heart without me even knowing it. Now I want to spend my life with you and dance all the dances that should have been yours." And 11 years and 2 kids later, we're still dancing. As a teacher, what is the saddest thing you've found out about one of your students? I have many. After 35 years, too many to count, so I will only share one. I have shared this before, but it blazes in my mind and my soul. It was not the worst, but it may have represented so many more than I comprehend. We were in chemistry, preparing for a laboratory assignment. There are safety procedures to be followed, and one of them is to shed the heavy coats and sleeves before you don the lab coat. She was a quiet and sweet girl. Good solid grades. Not A's, but you could tell she could if she were so inclined. She was certainly bright enough. I tried to reach her each and every day in her shyness. Not enough to embarrass her. Just enough to let her know that I knew she was real, that she existed, and that she meant something to me. That she mattered. I came to her and told her that the big baggy hoodie that she was wearing must go. She quietly tried to not let it go. I became insistent. She shed the hoodie. She was a sweet girl and she shed it because I asked. As I took the hoodie, I saw her arms. The cuts. Deep and parallel across her arms. I raised my eyes to hers and nearly hit my knees on the floor. Her eyes were filled with shame and my eyes were filled with horror. The look of shame in her eyes that will haunt me until the end of my days kept me from breaking down at that moment. I had been at this school for many years at this time and had a great deal of respect for my students. I did something that I would not have done at any other school. I quietly asked her to join me in the hall and left my class. There was nothing dangerous in this lab activity, and I asked my student to sit on their stools until I returned. Once in the hall, I told her we were going to the assistant principal's office and she was in no trouble. I was concerned for her and worried for her well-being. As we walked down the hall, the first sob hit me. Then the second. She looked at me in concern. A huge hammer hit my head and I knew I must stop. I must stop showing my horror and my fear for this beautiful child. I must not let her see this. I must show her strength and support. I must show her love, as I certainly did love her. You see, I knew something about this child. I knew a person that had entered her home when she was only 4 years old and her younger brother was only 8 months old. I knew that they had been locked in a bedroom for 4 days without food and water or even something so simple as a diaper. I knew this happened more than once. I knew even worse. I knew her mother had been a drug user and had sold certain aspects of herself to pay for the drugs. I knew this had been going on some time and this child was now facing a very serious crisis. We entered the assistant principal's office. The situation was addressed. But, I wanted it addressed further. I wanted her thighs looked at. I suspected she was also cutting her thighs. I wanted all possible wounds looked at. The AP informed me we could not do that. I understand the reason, but I so wanted this precious girl to be okay. The AP did contact the mother and suggested counseling. We all know how that went. I will tell you the end of the story. This was 10 years ago. The child friended me on Facebook. I keep track of her life every day. It is a joy. Somehow. Some way she moved on. Not entirely. I still see the haunting of her past in her posts, but she married a good man and has 2 beautiful boys. She struggles. She did not seek higher education. How could she really? She works a minimum wage job and is married to a man who is not much better, but her home is clean and her children are clean and healthy and look so happy. Her children look so happy. Yes, I said that twice because that is an indication that she overcame so much and is making a better world for her babies. She is a true testament of overcoming a childhood that would break the best of us. Maybe she is not perfect, but who of us are? What is the most despicable thing your in-laws have ever done to you? How did you react? I usually share the stories of my monster-in-law aka Mill, but today I will share the story of my father-in-law. On Mother's Day 2 years ago, I planned a brunch for all the women in my family and kicked hubby out for the day. It was meant to be filled with fun and of course appreciation for the mamas. My husband went to spend the day with his dad, who he decided to repair a relationship with now that he was a father himself. His father had a history of drinking but swore he was now sober. When my husband got there, his father was wasted and halfway through hanging out he attacked him with a knife, stabbed him and was chasing him around the house. My husband successfully left and headed straight to the hospital. While I'm wrapping up my brunch, considering it was now ruined since I had a husband in the hospital, his dad shows up to our house looking for him and is literally wasted, bloody, and is screaming that I am a B, he hates me, I'm a W. It was a mess. Everyone knew that he was an alcoholic, so it wasn't exactly surprising, but he ruined my brunch and of course absolutely broke my husband's heart because he was looking forward to meeting his dad as a sober man and building a relationship as 2 dads. He still has a huge scar as well. As always, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Leave a comment or 2 or 3 lol. Am I the jerk for using flashcards to explain to my brother and his wife why they can't bring their rainbow baby to my wedding? My fiancé and I are getting married. We've decided weddings are going to be child-free. No hate towards children, just to keep it more organized and contained. My brother Chris and his wife have a 3-year-old son who everyone calls Miracle or Rainbow Baby. He came after several failed pregnancies that lasted for years. When they found out that my nephew was included in the no children rule, they tried to convince me to make an exception for him. Chris told me his son is a miracle baby and his presence at the wedding will bring blessings for me and my fiancé. I refused and said no, the wedding is child-free. His wife kept sending my fiancé pictures of my nephew nephew when he was months old. I told them no one would stop. My brother told me this might cause a rift in our relationship. I again said no and explained that the wedding is child-free. He asked again and pointed out how his baby is different since he's a rainbow, a miracle baby. I again said no and explained that the wedding is child-free. They brought it up when they visited my home and I knew they weren't going to stop. So I made flashcards in advance with the phrase "the wedding is child-free" and pulled them out and started slowly showing them the flashcards one by one in this order. The wedding with a sticker of bride and groom is a child with a sticker of a baby free with a sticker of the sign, period, with a huge black dot sticker. They both were stunned. I asked if they get it now and Chris had lost his shite. His wife had already grabbed her stuff and walked out. Chris called me a hole for doing this and said that I disrespected him, his wife and their son, who's my one and only nephew. He rushed out after we argued. My fiancé saw the whole thing and thought that it was funny. But my parents and Chris are livid beyond measure. They're telling everyone about the amount of disrespect and mockery I had displayed towards them, and I'm being told to fix it now. My girlfriend is begging me to give up my Ivy League scholarship so we can continue dating. I am being faced with an amazing opportunity, but I don't know whether to choose between my academic career or the love of my life. I would do anything for my girlfriend, but I am feeling extremely nervous to simply give up the future that I've been working for since I was 13. My girlfriend and I have been dating since we were 15. We're both 18 now and in the middle of applying to colleges. Ever since I was 13 I knew I wanted to be a scientist since it was my favorite subject. Ever since then I've worked tirelessly in all my science classes and done any type of scientific extracurricular that public school had to offer. My girlfriend and I met in our high school science club. I was the president and she had just moved to the area and was trying to join clubs to make new friends. We fell in love in only a couple of months, and we've been together since then. I truly believe she is my soulmate and it's only making this decision harder. My girlfriend doesn't really understand my passion for science since academics have never really been her thing. Don't get me wrong, she is a smart girl, but I have been applying to Ivy League colleges and she has said that she's fine just going to community college after we graduate. She pretended to be supportive of me, but now I see that she never really wanted me to get accepted into the colleges that I wanted, since they're all far away. Either way, last week I received my acceptance letter in the mail from my top college, Princeton. My hands were shaking as I read the letter, and I saw my dad cry for the very first time when I told him the news. It felt like a dream come true until I told my girlfriend about the letter. I remember being so excited on the phone telling her about how they were offering me a full scholarship, but all she said was "yeah, that's great," and ended the call pretty fast. The next time we saw each other in person, my girlfriend broke down crying and said that she couldn't deal with the fact that I would be so far. She said she felt bad about asking, but then she looked at me and asked me to turn down my scholarship and go to school in the state, so that I could remain close to her. I don't even know how to describe what I felt when she was saying all this, up until that day I saw her as my loving, supportive girlfriend. But I guess that's not who she is. She's always known how much a career in science means to me and how badly I've wanted this the entire time she's known me. I don't understand how she could ask me to give it up like it was nothing. I don't want to believe that she's being selfish. I think she's just in love, just like me. I'm feeling incredibly torn. One half of me knows that I would hate myself if I gave up this opportunity, but what if this girl is meant to be my wife? What if she's my future instead of Princeton? My entitled neighbor cut all my oak trees without my permission. He lied about the document from the city that gave him permission to remove the trees. I hauled him into court and I'm getting the trees back. I moved into my current house about 2 years ago. It's a beautiful 3-acre property, mostly flat except for about a dozen large trees bordering part of a road that runs alongside my property. I'm not sure what type they are, but they're pretty big. I think they're oaks. I love them. They provide some great shade in the summer during part of the day and are just pretty. My neighbor doesn't like them. He's not really my neighbor, since his house is quite a bit down the road, but he's the closest one to me. When I first moved in, he came over, introduced himself, and asked if I planned to do anything about the trees. I was confused and told him no. He told me a little bit before I moved in, that one of the trees had a branch break off and fall into the road, causing an obstruction that lasted a whole day according to him. He said the previous owner didn't care and didn't cut down the trees, but he hoped that I would. I told him I would talk to the previous owner and see about it. I did that, and though it was 2 years ago, as I recall, the owner told me he went out and moved the branch the moment he saw it. We talked a bit more and I decided not to cut down the trees. Like I said, I liked them. So I was away this past week visiting family for our annual reunion. I came back and honestly almost drove past my own house, because I was so used to seeing the line of trees and they weren't there. He cut down all my trees. I immediately went and asked him and he said he had them removed due to being a hazard, and that it was legal because the city signed off on it. I was livid but just left and told him to stay off my property. There aren't even stumps, they are completely gone. I asked my other neighbors, one who lives down the road the opposite way, and another across the way what happened, and they said he had a company out there cutting them down all week. One of them asked him about it and apparently, he showed them some document from the city that gave him permission to remove the trees. It's left that whole area of my property an ugly strip of dirt and loose earth. I know the trees are definitely on my property. The previous owner and real estate agent walked around with me, and I remember them showing me the extent of the property, and it's not like the trees are right up against the road. The trunks were 15 to 20 feet in from the road and were probably 15 feet apart. I'm not sure, but they stretched a pretty good amount along the road, and some of the branches definitely hung over the road. Update: I went to the police first thing and asked to report trespassing and possible vandalism. The officer took down my story and I even brought him some photos, which he asked to keep. He then told me that unless I had proof of my neighbor cutting these trees down, or giving the authorization to cut them down, it may turn into my word against my neighbors. He suggested I just pursue this in court myself. While at the police station, I asked who I would talk to specifically with the city about permits and tree removals, and the officer told me to try the public works. I went home and called them. The lady asked for my street address, so she could check it against their records, and I did, and she found nothing. Not a single thing. She said there was nothing regarding my address or property in the last 6 weeks. I noted that and thanked her. Then I called an arborist and made an appointment for later this week. The arborist also asked that I have some photos of the trees when she comes, which is fine since I have more. Finally, I looked up companies that do landscaping logging, or tree removal, covering all my bases, since I don't know who would handle tree removal anywhere other than a forest. After calling a few places, I got one who confirmed that they did the job, and told me they were following a city order. That call was after I called the lady at the public works for the city, and she told me there was no record of my address. It seems my neighbor lies to this company. They didn't ask me for more details, and when I asked to show them the order, they said they couldn't tell me. I have connected with a relatively local lawyer, and we talked for about an hour. He wanted all the details I had, especially when I mentioned the arborist. He asked for the number and told me was going to ask for additional information from the inspection that would be important for a lawsuit. He also gave me the number of a surveyor and told me I should call them as soon as possible. He then set me up with an appointment at his offices next week after the arborist visit. As far as the criminal charges, he told me that was my call, but we could talk more about it next week. He did comment that making a police report was a smart move. Lastly, he told me not to contact the neighbor anymore, to get a written testimony from the witness neighbor, and to report any documents in the mail from either my neighbor or the company that did the job, as well as refusing contact should the neighbor come to my door. So it looks like I'm taking my neighbor's SS to court. I hope somehow I can get my trees back, even just having new ones planted. That area of my property is so barren now. We spoke to the police, who then spoke to the neighbors down and across the street, who stated they saw the neighbor and the company cutting down the trees, and then finally they spoke to my neighbor. I don't know much beyond that with the criminal investigation. I hauled his SS into court. Well, first, the arborist came, as did the surveyor. The trees were on my property and they were white oaks. The arborist gave me an estimate on having 15 mature white oaks brought and replanted on my property, which was just shy of $650,000, though he did say some trees would die and that would drive the cost up. I also had my property appraised for the difference before and after losing my trees. It then became a question of whether I wanted to pursue my lost trees and see how much their lumber was worth, or sue for the replacement cost and loss of property value. Basically, do I want the trees back or do I want the cost of the ones I lost? I picked the trees. The actual court stuff started a lot sooner than I thought. We filed, a few weeks passed, and a few days before our day in court, his lawyer reached out with a settlement offer. Apparently, he was wealthier than I thought. I'm getting the trees back. It's going to take a long time, but I will have all 12 trees back on my property at no cost to me. My neighbor has also put his house up for sale, and I haven't seen him for quite some time now. How did you escape your arranged marriage? What is the hardest thing you have ever done? At the age of 18, I was arranged to marry a stranger nearly 10 years my senior. On the day of my wedding, I began crying because I was to marry a man I didn't know. My entire family showed up, all cheering and celebrating. After I had signed the papers establishing we were man and wife, I went to a separate bedroom crying. No one said a word. No one uttered a sound. Nobody asked why the bride was in a separate room crying her eyes out. I refused to accept the marriage. I refused to consummate the marriage. I did not cooperate at all. I recall shoving the man when he touched me and he slapped me. According to him, I was now his property and he could do as he pleased. For the next 4 years, I resisted, did not speak a word to him. I hated my parents for what they did to me. I had my in-laws call me saying that I wasn't behaving appropriately, and for me to be a good little girl, I had to accept that I was a wife now. My cousin, who I begged to buy me Plan B because I was certain that I was going to be assaulted on my wedding night, months down the road, stated this was my fault, that I had brought this upon myself. I have been shunned by my entire family. I heard rumors that they believed that I was superior because I was an American and wouldn't accept a village Bengali man. I have had all kinds of abuse, insults, and humiliation thrown at me because of this incident. I suffered PTSD from it. For a long time, I couldn't even say out loud that I was married to a stranger. I would shake, begin crying, and feel as though I was locked in the room with him again. There are millions of women that were in the very shoes that I have been in. Many of them don't resist. They accept this as their fate and live their lives with a stranger. It is terrifying to go against everyone. It is horrifying to fight for your freedom when everyone shames you for it. It's heartbreaking to hear your own mother tell you that you are not meeting the needs of your husband, while you are crying and broken that your own family sold you out to a stranger. So many women are scared of the consequences. They are scared to create a scene. Your reputation is on the line, as is your family. So you take the easy route and just submit. To this day I have to hear comments from my mom about how I destroyed this man while she doesn't notice how she destroyed our relationship. I stand by my decision. I am no one's property. I'll take every backlash, but I will not sell my soul to a tradition that breaks women. Am I the a-hole for reporting a coworker for sexist jokes? This was my first time working directly with a male coworker at a job. I had never held a conversation with him prior, but he always came to work with a bright attitude. He's always making jokes that could be considered offensive, but everyone just laughs them off. I could tell from the start of the shift that he's also very type A in the way he likes to get his work done. So, we're working with a group of females from other disciplines, trying to complete a project and bouncing ideas off each other. The male coworker keeps trying to talk over us and tell us exactly what we're going to do, and his way is the best way. I'm not the type to acquiesce to that kind of attitude. The other ladies got quiet, and I pushed back, telling him the other ideas make more sense. He proceeds to start talking about how women aren't made the way they used to make them, and I asked what he meant, and he said in the kitchen and quiet. So now everyone in the room is uncomfortable, and he tries to laugh it off and tell us how the women he usually entertains are more subservient, so that's what he's used to. I tell him we're not his women, so that shouldn't matter, and that's an ignorant line of thinking in a field where males are in the minority. He huffs and puffs for the rest of the meeting. At the end, he comes up to me specifically and asks what we accomplished today, and I said we've accomplished the fact that we have different POVs that won't mesh well. He responds with no, you should have learned to be quiet and do as you're told, and walks off. I was floored. I sat on his comments for a full 24 hours before notifying upper management that we would not work well together, and when they asked me why, I told them. This launched a full investigation that was referred to HR because the other women signed statements as well. I guess the male coworker was called in about it, and he proceeded to spread throughout the department that he was just joking, and I was easily offended and highly sensitive. Ever since, some of my other coworkers have made snide remarks indirectly about watching what people say when I'm in the vicinity and trying to get the coworkers that still interact with me not to. I've been told several times, oh, he was just joking, from people that were never involved or know nothing except for what the male coworker has said. Immediate management says I've made the environment tense because he was just joking. I feel like I was justified, but all the "are you sure he wasn't joking" and being iced out makes me second guess. Am I the a-hole? Has anyone made you feel ashamed of yourself? I hooked up with a girl named Anya. She and I crossed paths at an art gallery. We were trying to figure out some stupid blotch art, and for the first time in my life I finally said the right things at the right time to convince an attractive girl to go home with me. I fell asleep with Anya in my bed. Not gonna lie, I was exhausted. One round was not enough for Anya. This girl could do more than rounds than a devastated ex at a bar. If I never tapped out and called it a night, she would still be on top right now. At around midnight, I woke up to the sound of Anya low-key laughing. She was wide awake with her phone in front of her face. When I asked her what she was doing, she apologized for waking me and casually said she was reacting to messages from her fiancé. Without hesitation, she showed me the messages before I had time to ask another question. Based on what I read after almost being blinded by the brightness of Anya's phone, it was clear that Anya's fiancé was worried about her and wanted to know where she was. I had no idea Anya was in a relationship, let alone engaged. She explained that she was part of an arranged marriage and her fiancé was not someone she loved or even liked. Apparently he was an ugly slob who played League of Legends all day. She said it was funny reading his messages because he didn't even know her well enough to spell her name right. I didn't know how to respond. Anya kissed me and said her plan was to fully embrace her hot girl phase and sleep with as many people as possible before she became a wife and a mom. I said I was kind of uncomfortable being the other guy and encouraged Anya not to proceed with the arranged marriage if it made her unhappy. Anya got upset when I was somewhat reluctant to kiss her back and said she counted on me to be less disappointing in bed. I said I was decent, not disappointing, but Anya disagreed and got dressed. I offered to drive her home because we used my car to get to my flat, but she insisted on using an Uber. I waited with her outside, even though she continued to tell me how mediocre I was in the bedroom. She said my warrior was way too small, which is an insecurity of mine, and the fact I am as silent as a mime makes it awful. She said my nips were shaped like angry eyes and my belly button looked off center. She said she didn't mean to body shame me, but she had nothing else to focus on during the deed because I was so bad at making her feel any kind of enjoyment. Out of frustration, I said I was beginning to feel sorry for the guy who was gonna marry her. Anya looked like she wanted to slap me, but she continued to roast me instead. She said my nerds looked like prunes and my roommate was far more attractive than me. It was the longest 2 minutes of my life. She finished it by saying, "And your armpit smelled a little too."
Dear my husband's coworker, stop trying to spread your legs for my husband. I know you looked through this website after you got advice here telling you to come clean to me about your affair with my husband. I personally couldn't find a thread that fits the description, but could be the wrong sub or you deleted it. So if you read this and it sounds familiar, then yes, it's about you. I have no plans of speaking to you in the future, but I want to make a few things clear. Yes, I do remember when we first met at the Christmas party and you kept trying to get my husband alone to talk. You pouted so much when he refused I thought you would quack. Do you remember how all of his colleagues were friendly with me? I remember when you approached my husband and I walking home from my birthday dinner. I'm pretty sure this was a coincidence, but seeing my husband practically jump away from you trying to hug him was the highlight of my night. I know my husband is hot, of course I know. I married him and had kids with him, but I bet you didn't know because you have only been at the company for a few months that your coworkers used to be my coworkers. I know all about you trying to get him alone after meetings, not only straight from my husband because you make him feel uncomfortable but also from them. Did you think he wouldn't talk to me after you accidentally sent him 2 provocative photos on 2 separate occasions? Did you think you could really get him? Did you look at his Instagram and think, wow, I want that life, I just need to lie to his wife and it's all mine? Do you think knocking on my door when I'm hosting a dinner party to hand me printouts of your conversations with him I would go off on the deep end and divorce him? I'm pretty sure HR has spoken to you already about your inappropriate behavior and misuse of his personnel file. I'm sure you are shocked maybe you didn't think my husband would report it. I don't know what repercussions you will get and I don't care. If you come near me, my husband, our kids or our nice home again, police will be called. A word of advice: if you're going to fabricate messages, you might want to get rid of the wrong number or at least replace it with a name.
What was the worst way your divorce was told to you? Let me preface this off by blaming all of you, the entirety of Reddit, for desensitizing me and giving me major trust issues on April Fool's Day. So here it goes. Yesterday I got a group text from my wife's, Sarah, side of the family stating there was an emergency family meeting happening that night over dinner at my mother-in-law's, Barb, house. I immediately had April Fool's spidey senses starting to tingle, but we haven't all got together since Christmas, so I overlooked it and said we, my wife and I, were in. We were the last to arrive and it was pretty somber when we walked in. We all sat down at the table and my wife's brother, Tim, informed the family that his wife, Ashley, has been having an affair and they are divorcing. The affair was with a long-time close family friend, Chris, who lived a block away. Chris's wife, Jen, had caught them when she came home early one day last week and broke the news to my brother-in-law Tim. Both families have been friends for years. They live less than a block from each other. They each have been married for 15 plus years, have 4 kids right around the same age. Honestly, I have always thought both of them were picture-perfect families. Hell, all 4 of them and their kids were at our house 2 weeks ago for a barbecue. Anyways, after airing a lot of dirty laundry, and their plans to divorce, how it could affect future family functions, and opening it up to the group of any questions. There was silence. I broke the silence with laughter and a slow clap, saying this was the best April Fool's gag I've ever seen, but I wasn't falling for it. I told Ashley and especially Tim they need to consider going into theater. Their performances were top-notch and tears seemed genuine. Being the newest member of the family, my wife and I married 6 months ago, this was probably not the best thing to say in hindsight. I probably should not have said anything. Everyone in the room looked horrified. My mother-in-law, who had been crying the entire time, lost all composure. She left the room in hysterics and did not return before we left. Tim just shook his head, and his cheating wife actually let out a brief chuckle before calling me out for being a dumbass for thinking this was a ruse. Then berating me for being so insensitive. The rest of the family sat in silence shaking their heads as my wife berated me for trying to make a joke out of a serious situation. I am still dumbfounded. In hindsight, I probably should have sat in silence. But I honestly still feel like I was calling out an April Fool's gag.
My boyfriend is very excited about a party that I am not invited to. My boyfriend, 22 male, and I, 19 female, have been together for about a year and he is amazing. We have had arguments here and there but nothing too serious except this one. Last week he got invited to a college party and I wasn't, to which I don't really mind. The problem is he was invited by one of the sorority girls who has made it clear that she has a crush on him on her socials. He plays football, she even has a highlight on her Instagram tagged my crush with his pictures. My boyfriend told me there is nothing to worry about because he is only interested in me. He said she is delusional to think that there could be something between them. The party is on Friday and he has been very excited about it. He already prepared what he was going to wear yesterday. He bought new LV shoes and designer clothes. Normally he doesn't care. He is always showing me the party group chat telling me how amazing everything is planned out. As he was showing me, he got an Instagram message from the sorority girl saying, "We should try it then." He swiftly swiped it away and acted like it was nothing, and when I asked him, he said she wants to learn how to throw a football. Alright. I also overheard him talking with his best friend about how amazing it's going to be. Honestly, I feel like this excited him more than our anniversary, and it's hurting me. I asked him if I can join him and he told me it's an invite-only party, so I can't come with him. I need advice on what to do because I feel so overwhelmed, and I am probably not thinking straight at the moment. What should I do? Update. Hey everyone. Thank you all for opening my eyes. I didn't want to think the worst about my ex-boyfriend, but y'all were right. After making this post I had a lot to think about and evaluate from the comments I received. Some were harsh to read, but I had to. I spent the next few hours crying alone in my apartment. For a very long time I have avoided the idea of snooping through his phone, but on Thursday night, I did and found very disturbing things. I went through his messages and took relevant screenshots of him talking to his sorority friend, but what I did not expect to find was the things I saw on his Discord. That's why I could not make an update earlier. He mentioned that I am his girlfriend to her and said he would leave me if she was up for it. He sent her flowers every Monday of the week since they started talking. Guess what? He has only bought me flowers twice in about a year. Since I could not go through everything on his Discord at night, I had to log in using a QR code on my laptop and found out he was messaging young girls, some as young as 13. The next morning I woke up and rushed to my mom's house, and turned off my phone. We talked for hours until I felt better and she advised me on what to do. I cannot mention every disgusting thing he has done here, but they would send each other pictures back and forth. One of them was so in love with him, she would send him money and random gifts. Whether he reciprocated really doesn't matter and I don't care. I wanted to kick him out of my apartment so badly, but I thought it would be better for me to pretend everything is fine for one more day, so I messaged him and told him I'm at my mom's till Monday. Let him have fun with the sorority girl because it sure will be his last. I took video recordings and screenshots of every conversation, and reported him to the local police on Friday evening with the attachments, and they got back to me on Saturday with a few questions. I told them where he was, and I am the sole reason he got arrested in the same designer clothes he had on Friday. After all this I had started realizing how manipulative everything he said to me was. He was my second boyfriend and I overlooked a lot of things because I was in love. Once there was a girl looking for him outside our apartment, and she was at most 16. I knew she was in high school or had just finished by the conversations she was having on the phone, but it never hit me that he could have been grooming her. I feel so disgusted and I probably need therapy to get through this. I no longer feel sad about him and the sorority girl, she can have him. He was on a college scholarship, I think that's gone too.
How do you face going to a estranged best friend's funeral? It's difficult to find the right words to express the overwhelming emotions I'm experiencing right now. My dear friend, Jay, has passed away, and I'm still in a state of shock. Jay and I became friends during our freshman year of college, and we were roommates for 3 remarkable years. We shared a deep understanding and supported each other through thick and thin. Even when we had differing opinions, we enjoyed exploring each other's perspectives. Jay was like a brother to me, and I even promised him that he would be the best man at my wedding. We often embarked on adventures together, along with our other friend, Grace, forming an incredible trio. 2 years after graduating college, I met someone extraordinary. She lit up my world, and we began dating immediately. She was upfront about her rare chronic illness that required significant management, but I was unwavering in my love for her. We decided to marry within a year of meeting each other. As we planned our wedding, I unintentionally distanced myself from my friends. I stopped responding to their messages and calls. We opted for a small family-only wedding and invited only one close friend from church who played the piano. Later, I heard from this friend that the people I had ignored were upset with me. I felt guilty and desired to reconnect, but my wife reminded me that we deserved a stress-free honeymoon without any unnecessary drama. Reluctantly, I followed her advice, and unfortunately, I never reached out to my friends again. I understand it sounds terrible, but life became so overwhelming. We moved into a new house that catered to my wife's specific needs, and I took on the responsibility of caring for her, alongside managing my own job. The weight of everything slowly accumulated, and I became too scared to re-establish contact with my friends, convinced that they probably despise me now. 7 years have passed since then. Yesterday, I received a voicemail from Grace, her voice filled with evident sorrow and tears. She informed me that Jay had tragically died in a car accident a week ago, and they were organizing his funeral. To my shock, she revealed that she and Jay had married several years ago, something I had no knowledge of. Uncertain if I would even listen to her message or whether to invite me, she hesitantly asked if I would attend the funeral. I spent the entire night sleepless, feeling as though I'm trapped in a dream. The funeral is in 2 days, and I know deep down that I must go, despite the overwhelming dread it fills me with. However, my wife, concerned about the potential stress it may cause me, wishes for my absence. She fears that my former friends hold resentment towards me, and she might be right. I don't want to tarnish Jay's memory by attending and being the one who caused all this pain. But Jay was my dear friend, and I can't live with myself if I don't pay my last respects. I don't know why I'm sharing all of this or what my next steps are. All I know is that I will attend the funeral, even if I'm terrified of ruining everything. I'm at a loss for words when it comes to comforting Grace. I can already anticipate my wife's anger. I'm a mix of fear, intense sadness, and a numbing emptiness that engulfs me. None of this seems real. I long for it to be just a nightmare. I installed a camera in the living room and caught my husband screwing the babysitter. Me and my husband are both in our mid-30s, and I have been having suspicions for almost 4 months since I hired this 17-year-old babysitter for my 3-year-old daughter. I'm a nurse working full-time, while he works 3 nights a week and comes home to sleep during the day. I felt I was going crazy because something was off and he refused to ease my mind and answer questions I had, so I put a camera in the living room and saw nothing till day 4, when he and the babysitter were making out on the couch behind my daughter's back while she was watching TV. I felt like my entire world came crashing to the ground. I felt all kinds of negative feelings, including guilt, even though I just wanted to keep my job when he complained about me pushing him to the side. As I kept watching the video, they started doing the deed right on the couch, and my 3-year-old actually woke up from her nap and ran out to witness it. They ended the session very quickly when my daughter came out, but I still felt sick to my stomach. He started crying when confronted, and tried to get me to listen, but I took my daughter, threw out the couch, and went to stay with mom. It's been a whole month now. The babysitter is gone, and he's still crying about his slip-up, even went as far as say the babysitter was the one initiating. I feel like I'm done with him after this. He managed to make me feel guilty for not dressing up or giving him enough attention. And now, I strongly believe I bear part of the blame for what happened. I feel disgusted, and my mind and heart keep racing, not knowing how to deal with all of this. He's begging for a second chance, and his family is defending him against me. He kept on saying that this is a mistake that all men make, and that I should forgive him. Should I? Am I the a-hole for not giving my family a percentage of the family business? 36M. My grandfather owned a business that has been in our family for generations. Everyone in our family has worked or helped out at the business. About 10 years ago, Papa decided to retire due to issues with his health. The business was failing due to lack of help and financial issues. My father and his siblings are older and most retired, so they didn't want to be bothered with it, nor did any of their children, including my siblings. I took part of my savings and gave it to my grandfather as a down payment to buy the business. There were a lot of naysayers, including my parents, siblings, and some other relatives saying how I should have let my grandfather sell the business, thinking that he would never see the rest of the money I owed him. Basically, my whole family didn't believe in me. Within the first 3 years I paid him off completely, which made the business mine. The business is now quite successful. I have 3 locations, and thankfully my grandpa got to see the success before he passed away. My wife and I have always been humble about our blessings and lived below our means because there was a bigger picture for us. We lived in a 2-bedroom house raising our family for over 15 years, driving beater cars. Still, the profits of the business helped me build a home from the ground up on a nice piece of land I was able to acquire. For the 4th of July I invited the family down to celebrate. A lot of my family hadn't seen my new home in person, so most of my relatives flocked in, and I was happy to have a nice family reunion. Our home is now a 6-bedroom beauty with 4.5 baths that sits on over 60 acres of land and a private lake. Suddenly, my father brought up the suggestion of me giving a percentage to the family, siblings and cousins. I told him I was, my family, as in my kids. My siblings have nice careers, but they also have a lot of debt. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Days ago, my mother mentioned it again. I told her that it wasn't up for discussion. She asked why wouldn't I want to share the success of my grandfather's business. I pointed out to her that while Grandpa may have started it, this was my business fair and square and it's my choice and that it would never happen. Not liking my tone, she ran to my father and siblings, who have now been texting me crazy texts like I'm selfish, greedy, that I don't care about our family. I've ignored it, but I'm wondering if I'm the a-hole? My creepy mommy boss is tracking my every movement. She was tracking me and would get angry at me for it. I've worked for this family since just before the new year. They have 2 kids, 2 and 8. I know they have trackers sewn into the 2-year-old's diaper bag and the 8-year-old's backpack. She told me about them and I obviously have no issue with that. The kids are great. My boss is a single mom who seemed really lovely from our first few meetings. A few weeks ago, she sent me a text asking if I could come in now because she got called into work. I lied and said I was in a big city in my state, visiting my sister for the weekend. It was a dumb white lie because I didn't want to be asked during the weekend if she kept being called in, as that has happened multiple times before and I really needed a full weekend to myself. She simply responded, "You don't need to lie, I'll find a backup." It definitely gave me super weird vibes and was super embarrassing, but I shrugged it off and figured she may have been at Trader Joe's earlier in the day when I went, or she saw my car, something like that. Then this Tuesday, I came in and she was definitely cold towards me. I had been out celebrating a friend's birthday Monday night at a bar, but I nursed one drink the entire night and was never even tipsy. I took showers in the morning and wore clean clothes, so there's no way I smelled like alcohol. But she confronted me and accused me of being hungover, said I reeked of booze, and kept asking if I had a drinking problem because why would I be drinking on a Monday night? I was really put off, and told her the truth, that it was my friend's birthday and I was just out celebrating with her and some other friends and hadn't even drank. She paused for a super long time and just nodded, and left for work like nothing happened. My boss is super religious and very vehemently anti-alcohol, but I still feel like it was a weird accusation. I asked my girlfriend when I got home if I smelled like alcohol or anything somehow, and she couldn't smell anything. Earlier today was the final incident that really cemented this stupid conspiracy theory in my head. I took the bus this morning when I normally take my car because I'm extra broke right now and need to save gas. I got to her house around 10 minutes early, but sat in a little wooded curb area for a while until it was my official time to start. 5 minutes before my start time, my boss texted me, "Have you left yet? I have a meeting at 10:30. I am never late." I walked in early, and she looked confused. When I mentioned taking the bus, she literally said, "Oh, that makes sense. What the hell do I do?" I looked all over my car, in my backpack, and in my car's car seat. I couldn't find anything. Am I overthinking this? I just looked with the help from my girlfriend, and found an AirTag duct taped to the underside of my car. So, very creeped out currently. Not sure what to say or do now. What was the moment you realized your significant other didn't care about you at all anymore? There were many signs that my husband didn't care about me anymore, like after 15 years of making a big deal of Valentine's Day, he didn't even acknowledge it. Despite the fact that the whole family came out of their rooms to find cards, gifts and candy from me, and I had hand-sewn little red lacy heart ornaments to decorate our ficus tree. Even after that, he did nothing to honor me. I discovered that he had been spending all our disposable income taking his coworkers to lunch while I was home clipping coupons for food, buying dented and expired cans and sewing all the kids' clothes to save money. He had nothing to say to me anymore despite our long history of lively debates and philosophical discussions and sharing of stories from our earlier lives. But the moment I knew beyond doubt that he didn't care about me anymore was the day we were both in the kitchen and I aspirated a mouthful of water. My airway was completely blocked. I frantically signaled to him that I was choking, that I needed help. He just stood there completely calm with his arms folded, watching me. I signaled the Heimlich maneuver but he didn't lift a finger to help me. I was starting to get tunnel vision, so I doubled my fist, placed it over my diaphragm and fell against the edge of the counter, launching the water out of my throat and gasping for air. I looked at him incredulously. "Why didn't you help me? What was I supposed to do?" This, from a guy who did search and rescue for the Navy. "Couldn't you see I was signaling the Heimlich?" "Well, yeah, but I didn't think that would work for water, so you just chose to do nothing?" I admit I'm a bit slow on the uptake, but I finally realized that he was hoping I'd die to save him the trouble and expense of a divorce and custody battle, not to mention alimony. And then I remembered that his previous wife, who'd been an alcoholic, had died suddenly. 911 operators, what call will you simply never forget? The call I'll never forget is the first suicide caller I got. It was around 11:30 p.m. and this girl called 911. She must have been 19 to 20 years old. All she says is that she is just calling to let me know where to find her body. I ask her where she's at, an address, intersection, anything. She tells me she's old enough to know that I already have her location, so she doesn't need to give it to me. That's not true. All I have is the location of the cell tower her cell phone is pinging off of. No way I can find her. I plead with her a bit, and she finally gives me an address. Then, I ask her how she's planning to do it. I'm trying to keep her on the line as long as possible so she doesn't actually hurt herself, but she doesn't answer me anymore. I decided to get the paramedics on the line so we can get police and fire rolling to her location. While I'm connecting to the fire department, I hear this crash and a choking sound. I don't know what she did, but my heart drops. I'm thinking she alived herself with me on the line. I give the address to FD and I have PD on the way. I'm listening on the radio while I'm trying to get this girl to talk to me again when I hear the officers ask to verify the address. They don't see a house there. I finally got this girl to come back on the phone and she's crying hysterically. I ask her what happened and she tells me she was in the bathroom and tried to hang herself. She was too heavy and the shower curtain bar bent. I'm a bit relieved because she's not dead, but she's still in danger. I asked her to give me the address again, and even though she's on the same street, her address is further south. Poop. I have to get officers and EMS that are closer to go. I started talking to her and so far so good. Officers get there, but they can't find her. I'm freaking out because I'm thinking she gave me the wrong address again. And she stops talking to me again. Just an open line. I don't know what to do. Silence. I attempted hanging up and calling her, no answer. I'm thinking I effed up. I ask my supervisor if there is anything else I can do, and they reassure me and tell me I did all I could. I listened to the police radio for a bit and saw that the officers managed to get into the house and found the girl, and she was being transported to the hospital. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. I took a break for a few minutes to collect my thoughts and went back to answering more calls. We were busy.
A private conversation with my husband was leaked to my family, and now they are certain I'm in an abusive relationship. My husband and I got married 5 years ago. We've been together for a total of 8 years. We have a great relationship, we love each other, and he had a great relationship with my family. We both have this game we engage into via text and in the bedroom where we pretend to be. One of us pretends to be like a master, and we engage in this type of talk over texting throughout the day until we end it in the bedroom. Anyway, 2 weeks ago we were doing that. I was out with my little sister and I left my phone with her to take some photos. She likes to use my phone to take pictures whenever we are together. Anyway, a text from him came using this language we use, something like, "Don't forget to do this thing, you beach. I better come and find you ready." Anyway, instead of asking me about this, she opened the texting app and saw previous messaging and snapped a photo of this part of conversation with her cell phone. The next day Mom called me and told me to come at once. I went and found my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, and my uncle. My mom was crying and saying she's sorry she didn't see it before, and my dad was angry. I didn't understand anything, but when they told me, I was furious with my sister and them. I told them nothing of what they're saying is true. My husband is a great man, and this is a sexual fantasy we sometimes play. The problem is they think I'm lying. My sister is a social worker, and she's convinced without a doubt that I'm lying like all the women she sees in her business to protect my husband because I love him. No matter what I tell them, they don't believe me. I even took my mom to my room and got naked in front of her for her to see that I'm not being abused in any way, but it's like I'm talking to walls. My sister is using her career to convince everybody that I'm being abused. I even gave my mom my phone and made her read the texts and private conversations between me and my husband, and I humiliated myself by making her read those intimate conversations about our KNKS and role-playing. She was disgusted at first but didn't say anything. Then she talked to my sister and came back to me saying that my sister has seen behavior like this with abuse victims, where I'm so brainwashed that I don't see how engaging in these types of activities is abuse. And that my husband has groomed me. We're 3 years apart in age, so I don't see the abuse he's making. And when I told her that BDSM was originally my suggestion, she yelled, "Please stop protecting him, we didn't raise you to be like that." My sister is not a bad person per se. I believe that because of what she sees in her work, she thinks that I'm suffering and projecting on me. I don't know what to do now. My husband found out about it a couple of days ago. My brother went to his workplace and made a scene in front of everyone. And now at work there is talk about him abusing me because of my brother's words. I don't know what to do right now. My husband says we should go no contact with my family since they won't believe anything we say. I told him that we should go to another state. We were planning to start a family and have kids, and with that happening I don't believe it'd be great to have a family where we live right now, where such rumors are held over our head. So a new place where no one knows us would be perfect for us. But my husband says if we did that, it'd appear that he forced me to run with him, and would enforce these ideas more into my family. What should we do? Update: those past 15 days have been hell. After my family called the police on my husband and they came to our house, things took a turn for the worst. We live in a relatively small town and most people know each other, so news travels fast that I'm in an abusive relationship and my husband abuses me. Our lawyer advised us not to speak to the police, and also not to mention to anyone at all that we engage in BDSM activities. The reason for that is that according to the law you can't consent to receive pain via any activities like hitting or rough intimacy, and also using restraints during intimacy makes the person restrained in the eyes of the law unable to consent even if they say they consented to be tied. So, if we mention to someone that we engage in BDSM and they went to the police, our words act like a confession or something like that. And yes, police most of the time do not follow the law to the T regarding BDSM cause they know the law is flawed in this aspect. However, if they want, for example, to ruin someone's life, they can then follow the law and arrest that person. You get what I'm trying to say? Everyone in my family now thinks that my husband abuses me, and the reason that he hasn't been arrested yet is because I'm too afraid to come forward, and there's no physical evidence. So, my entire family is now pressuring me. My husband was confronted by one of my cousins and they exchanged fists outside of a local shop. They were both arrested, but my husband stayed locked up for some time, and my brother's friend, the officer that came to our home, roughed him up pretty bad there, calling him a wife beater and an animal and all other vile words. As I mentioned, the word got around very fast, and a week and a couple of days ago my husband was fired from his job. Our lawyer told us we can sue the company, but my husband refused since the only thing he wants now is to move to another state and put this nightmare behind him. Our lawyer issued a restraining order against almost all of my family members, including my mom, dad, brother, and sister, and she made sure that these orders specify that they can't even contact my husband at all, even via text or emails. My husband since then was preparing himself to move away. And last night he went to another state. He'll be staying with one of his childhood friends till he finds a place to rent. He told me to stay for a bit and not follow him right away because he needs a break from everything. That I don't really understand. I was abused just like him, but whatever. Of course, all of this drove a big wedge between me and him. And a couple of nights before we got into a fight, and he said to me that if I didn't suggest and encourage him to get into the BDSM with me, none of these things would have happened, and we both exchanged some hurtful words. Well, now he's in another state. He hasn't picked up my calls since yesterday. He just texted me that he's at his destination and safe. Before he left, he told me that if I chose to follow him, he will never engage in any kind of BDSM activity with me again, never ever again, and that I need to think about it clearly to decide if I want to remain married to him or not without those activities, especially that I was the one who pushed for them before. I really don't understand why he's punishing me like that. It's not like I had anything to do in this poop show. Anyway, that's the situation right now. I'm here and he's there. And I have a lot of thinking and decisions to make. My family are all sending me texts to congratulate me that I pushed him away. I keep sending them back to leave me alone and never contact me again. I wish that no one ever encounters anything like what happened to me ever. Go to part 2.
A private conversation with my husband was leaked to my family, and now they are certain I'm in an abusive relationship. My husband opened his phone and sent me this one message, then closed it once again. Please stop trying to reach me, I don't want to talk to you. I'm okay and well. By the way, I changed my place to another one, so don't call X, his friend. I'm not staying at his place and I don't want you to know where I am right now. I don't feel like talking to you or anyone that we know for some time. Respect that and stay the F away. I don't know when I will be able to speak to you again, and I won't blame you or even question if you filed for divorce right now. I think it'll be great for everyone and will make your family happy. After this message, he closed his phone. He deactivated all of his social media accounts yesterday, and I don't have any way to know how to reach him. I honestly don't know now what I should do. I called his friend, the one he was supposed to stay at, and he told me he booked a ticket to another state the same night but didn't tell him where he was going and didn't give him any contact information. So now I don't even know where he is at to follow him and complete our plan or leaving this hell place. I don't know anything right now. Update: my husband doesn't want to continue being with me. He'll file for a divorce and I'll receive my papers through my lawyer. I can't reach him anymore. I'll be moving out of my town to a new place that I've managed to rent in another place out of state. I'll be changing all of my numbers and social media accounts have been deactivated. The only person who can contact me is my lawyer to forward me my divorce papers once they arrive. I won't be posting any more about this issue as it's now over for me and I want to throw it all behind me. I'll never forgive my sister for ruining my marriage like this just because she had to go all social worker on me. If the beach had just minded her own business, I wouldn't be in this predicament and I would still be with my husband. I've sent her a lengthy message telling her we are no longer sisters because she ruined the only thing I valued in life. She retaliated and said I should be thanking her because she got me away from an abusive relationship. I called her delusional, and she clearly needed to prove something to herself if she went this far in convincing the whole family of a lie. My sister was never good at her job, didn't even prioritize it, and I'm surprised she hasn't been fired from being a social worker. I genuinely don't understand how she even completed a degree in social work and now works with victims of abuse, and still she's completely oblivious to how you approach and treat a potential victim. Clearly she sucks and needed this one thing to make up for all her failures. I did tell her all of this and she called me a beach, so I told her to F herself and I was going to report her to her employer to get her away from actual abuse victims because she cannot do her job properly. She begged me not to do that because she's barely holding on to that job as it is, but I told her it was karma for being a stupid beach. I have cut all contact with my entire family. As far as I'm concerned, they don't even exist anymore. My girlfriend and her family detest me for her taking Plan B. Before I continue, I want to acknowledge that I should have been more cautious and take responsibility for my actions. I am a 22-year-old male, and my girlfriend, 21, and I have been together for about 3 years. The issue arose when I realized that her intimacy drive was much higher than mine. After a year into our relationship, she suggested having intimacy without rubber and relying on the pull-out method. Initially, I agreed but soon felt anxious about the situation and asked if we could go back to using rubber instead of a clear response. She began accusing me of being overly anxious and claimed to know her body better than I did. This upset me, and whenever I tried to introduce rubber again, she would dismiss my concerns with the same remarks. Although I was hesitant, I ultimately accepted her proposition because she assured me that she would take emergency contraception such as Plan B or the abortion pill in case of an accident. She seemed enthusiastic about this arrangement and even expressed fantasies about being pregnant during intimacy, urging me to ejaculate inside her. However, I always pulled out regardless. Fast forward to August 2023, and we had just finished having intimacy where I pulled out as usual. She wanted to go again, but I was cautious about the possibility of accidentally getting her pregnant if I ejaculated more inside her. While I went to wash up in the bathroom, she insisted that I could continue and finish inside her because she would take Plan B afterward. Conflicted, I agreed and did as she requested. However, she immediately became upset, claiming she didn't think I would actually go through with it. Despite her reaction, I promptly took her to get Plan B, paid for it, and provided her with information about the pill. She reassured me that I was unnecessarily anxious about the situation. A few days later, her parents found the Plan B wrapper while going through her trash. They reacted with anger, arguing that the pill was dangerous, and blamed her for not knowing any better. It should be noted that her parents had never discussed this matter with her before. They cited anecdotes and unreliable websites claiming that she could become infertile or need to have her uterus removed. They had a history of being overly concerned about the virus and had previously made baseless claims about me making her infertile due to having the vaccine in my bloodstream. In response, she told them that she felt pressured by me to take the pill, emphasizing that I had taken her to the store and paid for it. She called me to inform me that she should have ended our relationship long ago. Surprisingly, her anger was not directed towards the fact that I ejaculated inside her, but rather that I had given her the pill. Her parents even suggested that it would have been safer for her to have an abortion. I accepted her decision, and later that night, she texted me, apologizing and attributing her behavior to hormonal fluctuations. However, she also informed me that we couldn't meet in person for a while due to the fear of her parents kicking her out. A month passed, and yesterday, I saw her for the first time. Since she was being tracked by her parents, we could only walk around her neighborhood together. Within 5 minutes of meeting, she glanced at her phone, noticed her mom approaching our location, and abruptly started running without explaining why. Afterwards, in our conversation, I expressed my belief that getting her the pill was not wrong and that no communication was provided to me regarding her change of mind. Additionally, I expressed discomfort with how her family treated me. In response, she revealed that her parents had made her test different therapists in an attempt to find one who would convince her to end the relationship. She also blamed me for her having to take the pill in the first place, implying that I had no right to play the victim now. At this point, feelings of guilt overwhelmed me. She was my first girlfriend, and I love her deeply. Although I believe ending the relationship is the right decision, the thought of leaving her to deal with her parents alone weighs heavily on my conscience. Note, this revised version aims to convey the core details of the story while improving readability and coherence. Some parts have been rephrased or rearranged for clarity. Redditors who have had a lot of success with women on dating apps and IG, how did you do it? I had the same question for literally the last 2 years of my life and just recently cracked the code. Over the last 14 days I have averaged 9 hinge matches per day with real 8s or higher and gotten a 39.3% response rate on IG with the opening line system I am about to explain that is women begging to see me almost every time. And it's not because I'm not insane looking or anything like that. I am a normal 5'11" foot white dude, average looking and also average below the waist. I've checked with my friends to make sure lol. It's actually all from absolutely elite intro lines. Which believe it not. I generate from effing AI app almost every time lol. Let me explain how. You see, as long as you are not super ugly and know how to talk, women are down to smash you. Women do not care about looks, they care about excitement. Just think about all those bombshells you know that are dating rat-looking dudes that are just funny or slick as hell. This means you need to stop with the boring stuff like hey cutie or so when's our first date. Their inboxes are filled with this shit and you need to stand out with new and interesting responses every single time. And that's what I use this app for. I really should be gatekeeping this level of game, but it's called RizGPT, with the blue and red looking logo, and it's literally the Wizard of Oz in AI form. Especially for opening lines, which are by far the most important. One that absolutely crushed for me this week was your beauty is blinding me. I'm going to need your name and number for insurance policies please, and it was 100% generated by the app in 30 seconds. Then after they respond, which like I said is literally 39.3% of the time, you can plug a screenshot into the app and it will generate options that are perfect almost every time until you get comfortable enough to just do it yourself. You guys will be amazed at how much your experience on dating apps improves after learning actual Riz level game like this. Having an abundance of women in your life is such a blessing and has improved everything for me these last few weeks. Hope it does for you too. Cheers.
Today I saw the man that saved me when I was being essayed. When I was 13 years old, I was essayed behind a church next to the middle school I attended. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a sunny day in the spring, right before school was out for the summer. I had a couple friends I hung out with and they persuaded me to skip class with them. As we were leaving the campus, security yelled at us to stop and everyone started running in different directions. I ended up behind the church, alone. As I was catching my breath, a man came around the corner. He was much bigger than I was at 13 years old. I was immediately scared and knew something bad was going to happen. He came up to me and said I was the snack he had been looking for. I tried to run, but he grabbed me. I had no chance of escaping him. He was such a big guy. I'll spare you all the details. The essay happened for around 3 minutes. I was exhausted from trying to fight off this man and trying to scream while he was crushing my body with his. I don't remember if I passed out, or if my brain has been trying to block out the trauma, but all I remember happening next is another man jumping on my attacker and just beating the crap out of him. I didn't see him coming. I was exposed, crying, dirty. I didn't know what to do. The man who saved me ended up knocking out my attacker. He gave me a blanket and comforted me as best he could until police arrived. The next couple years of my life were just a blur of depression. The man was arrested. My family moved us away from the area and we never told anyone besides my immediate family. It has been 8 years since this happened. Today I went to McDonald's near the neighborhood I grew up in and saw the man who saved me that day. I went through the drive-thru and he handed me my food. As soon as I looked into his eyes I recognized him but couldn't tell where I knew him from. He smiled at me and said, "You don't remember me, huh?" I laughed awkwardly and said, "Remind me." All he said was the name of that church, and every single memory that I had been trying so hard to forget came flooding back. I looked at him again and started sobbing. It was such an insane situation. I was sobbing in the McDonald's drive-thru. I was partly crying because of all the memories, but mostly because this man saved me and I didn't even remember him. He came out, we sat down, and we talked for almost an hour, just about life. He told me that his fiancée is pregnant with their first baby and they're expecting a baby girl. He's doing well. I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I've thought about him through the years and have always wondered where he was, how he was. Today I finally got my peace.
I dumped this girl 4 times during our relationship. Now, I work for her mom. In high school, there was this girl named Lucy who was absolutely obsessed with me. I didn't like her much, to be honest, but she was one of the hottest girls in our school and had the best body I'd ever seen. This led to a cycle of me hitting Lucy up on Snap, us connecting, me entering into a relationship with her to tap that, me tapping that, me losing interest, and me breaking up with her. Between cycles, Lucy would have other flings, but I guess none of the guys ever stuck because she usually came back after a while, though sometimes it took a lot of texting. Anyway, our relationship was firmly over by the time high school ended, and I mostly forgot about her. Lucy sent me one text, that I'm pretty sure she sent while drunk, telling me how much she hated me and how I took advantage of the fact that she was in love with me, but I didn't care. I sent her back a shrug emoji and never thought about it again. However, at a work party, my boss was introducing everyone to her daughter, only for it to be Lucy. We were both shocked when we saw each other, and her mom was surprised to see that we knew each other. However, Lucy just said, "Oh yeah. I know Nick. This is Nick, Mom." For reference, my actual name is Nicholas and my boss, Lucy's mom, always called me by my full name, but the way she said Nick made me realize that Lucy had complained to her mom a lot about me, especially since my boss immediately started giving me the stink eye afterwards. Now, I'm thinking that I should probably apologize or something, but I have no clue what to say. Is this something I should even bring up? Should I go to Human Resources and report this? What do you think? I assaulted my brother at his wedding. My wife Kate is an amazing woman who has been through a lot. She was raised in an abusive household and has experienced rope twice. Not long after Kate and I started hanging out, she went through a deep depressive period. She started hurting herself, and me and my best friend convinced her to get help after a particularly scary incident, so she went to a mental health hospital for a few months to start the process on working through her past traumas. I visited her every week and called her daily to check in and remind her I was there for her. Most of my family would get upset when I talked to them about Kate. They couldn't understand why I would want to be the support person for someone with such deep issues when we had just met. I always told them the same thing, I couldn't explain it, but I just felt such a deep connection to her, and I was so impressed by how amazing she is after going through everything she did, and that regardless of what it was, as I wanted to be in her life, so they should get used to it. When I say I would do anything to make this woman as happy as possible, I mean it. She's earned it. Kate is now a happy, confident, self-assured person, but she still has trauma and she still lives with it, and I help her however I can to make that weight less heavy for her. I'll admit a few times over the years I've had to cancel family plans, nothing major, just like a dinner or bowling, because of Kate having a panic attack or just being in a more vulnerable position and needing a quiet night in. It doesn't happen often, and Kate has always reached out to my family after to profusely apologize and ask for a good time for us to reschedule. My brother got married to his wife a week ago. Everything was going fine. Kate was having a blast dancing with my sisters until one of our cousins accidentally tripped and knocked her over. He fell on top of her and Kate had a major panic attack. The cousin tried everything he could to help. And there's no hard feelings there. Kate has apologized to him for scaring him as well, and he just joked saying it was a good excuse to learn how to use his 2 left feet. But my brother freaked out while Kate was having the panic attack, and while I was trying to soothe and calm her down, he was screaming at us to go somewhere private if she was going to cause a scene. Kate was crying hysterically and completely reliving one of the worst moments of her life, and he was yelling at her. I was so mad, but I had to calm Kate down, so I picked her up and carried her to a quiet room and stayed with her until she was okay. She felt so bad and kept saying over and over again that she ruins everything and apologizing. I told her that what he did was unacceptable and that it wouldn't have been a big scene if he didn't make it one. She can't control her panic attacks, but he can control his outbursts, and he made it way worse for her. I was still really mad at him, but I told Kate that I would go and talk it out with him, so that's what I attempted to do. Him and his wife were both really angry that she couldn't make it to another room before having a breakdown. I tried to take a few deep breaths and explain that she can't hold in a flashback. They just happen and that she hasn't had a serious panic attack in over a year, so it's normal for them to be more intense. I asked them to put themselves in her shoes and how upset they would be if someone was going to hurt them, and they were terrified, and instead of helping I yelled and berated them for being afraid. My brother said that that's different because that would be them in a real situation, and this was all a fragment of my wife's issues. But this was real. What she went through happened to her, and during her flashbacks they feel just as real as that event, so it is the same thing. I said as much, and that they aren't being fair to someone who has always gone above and beyond to be nice to them even on her hardest days. One of my sisters said that my brother was being a jerk and to stop being a drama queen. My brother then blew up again and got in my face and said if I hadn't married a delusional girl who got messed up and broken by some other guys, his wedding wouldn't have been ruined. I lost it. I punched him. This broke his nose. He fell on the ground and started crying. I got in his face and told him that he was more messed up than she will ever be, and if I ever found out he talked about Kate that way again, I would break a lot more than his nose, and I left. My parents tried to calm me down and said it was messed up what he said, but that none of it was technically untrue. I flipped out and told them if they genuinely felt that way, that I never wanted to hear from anyone who thinks that, because she doesn't need that in her life, and I don't need people who don't respect and care about the best thing that has ever happened to me. I know hurting him was wrong, but Kate has been scared, depressed, and in pain, but she was never messed up or broken. And the insinuation that the strongest person I have ever met is nothing more than a broken dish that needed to be glued back together as if it was that simple pushed me over the edge of being rational in that moment. My sisters and the majority of my extended family are on my side. But my parents, brother, and some of my other family are really angry that I would hurt him on the best day of his life. But he made it one of Kate's most embarrassing, and I won't forgive or apologize to him for his actions. What was the incident at your school? I went to a Catholic school, so we had a school chaplain who was essentially a friend to the kids. It sounds really creepy when you say it like that, but the dude was fucking amazing. He talked multiple students out of suicide, helped tons of kids come to terms with and overcome bullying, harassment, and sexual/domestic abuse, as well as encouraged every single student to reach for their dreams. Anyway, he once went the extra mile for a troubled family at my school. The two kids in question were adopted brothers, and both were incredibly unstable. The brothers would be your best friend one second, and they suddenly fly off the handle the next, making you literally fear for your life. Knowing their family problems, the school chaplain volunteered to become the two boys' godfather to legally be able to help them and their family out financially. About a year after I finished school, the school chaplain appeared in the local newspapers. He had been arrested and imprisoned for raping the older of the two lads. For most people, that was enough to condemn him, but most people I went to school with found the whole thing somewhat suspicious. Whenever someone encountered one of the two boys, they would instantly launch into a step-by-step recount of what happened, as if desperate to convince everyone they knew they were telling the truth. The only thing wrong was that these step-by-step recounts were usually vastly different each time they were told, as if poorly thought out. Regardless, the chaplain was imprisoned and eventually died of cancer while still inside. It was only after his death that it finally came out that the sexual assault never happened. The chaplain had run into financial trouble himself, and so was unable to keep giving the boys' family money. As punishment, the whole family, yes, the parents, were the ones to come up with the idea, and invented the sexual assault story to teach him a lesson. The guy was a ducking hero. He even helped my girlfriend at the time get through her parents' divorce in one piece, yet his lot in life wound up with him sad, forgotten, and alone.
I think my sex doll might be alive. I want to preface this by saying that I am not some sort of creep. I'm not an incel spending all my spare time lamenting that women won't have sex with me because of my jaw structure, and I'm not some sick pervert with such elaborate and bizarre fantasies that real women can't satisfy me. I bought a sex doll because I'm quite frankly anxious to the point of near disability. It gives me no pleasure to reveal that during my 25 years of life on this planet, I've never been so much as kissed. The very idea of being intimate with another human being, allowing myself to open up and express my feelings to another person deeply terrifies me. I am so utterly horrified of doing something wrong, of making someone angry, of being an inconvenience that I simply avoid as much contact as possible with other people. I was extremely lucky to inherit my house from my parents after they passed away when I had freshly entered adulthood. I don't think I could have ever gone through the process of trying to find an apartment, much less find a roommate to split rent with. A cousin of mine at a local insurance company managed to land me an interview for a night shift janitorial position, and even though I vomited twice from stress before the interview itself, I did manage to get the job. With a modest inheritance, a low cost of living, and no hobbies, I slowly began to acquire a decent bit of savings. Not a lot, mind you, I was still only a janitor, but enough to put some money away for the future. As the years passed, I started to become more and more lonely with no way to alleviate the feeling. Did you know that isolation can actually cause brain damage in humans? Long-term effects of solitary confinement in prisoners can cause intense psychological and physiological issues, including chronic pain and psychosis. With my parents dead, the closest thing to social interaction I had anymore was passing by the night security guard on my way into the office building where I worked, and he had long since given up on trying to make small talk with me. I was trapped between a rock and a hard place. I either let myself be driven to madness from loneliness or attempt to somehow make friends when the very thought of trying to talk to another person made me feel physically nauseous. I won't lie, I did consider suicide as an alternative to both these options at times. Some will say that the purchasing of the doll was a bit of a drastic measure and that it would have been better for me to seek therapy or some other more conventional way to work through my anxiety. They're probably right, but what you have to understand is that the idea of just getting therapy to me felt about as easy as just scaling Mount Everest. Besides, the doll itself was never meant to be a complete solution in the first place. My goal was to practice having some sort of relationship, to inoculate myself to the idea of interacting with a fellow human being until I could eventually discard the object and socialize properly with real people. I didn't even initially want to get a sex doll. At first, I was considering just getting a clothing store dummy, but something about their facelessness and obvious artificial nature made me uncomfortable. Besides, I figured I would eventually need some sort of practice with the more intimate side of human interaction. After a few weeks of scouring the internet, I found the model I was interested in. It cost me about $3,000 and was equipped with simulated body heat and the ability to realistically breathe and moan. I was most excited at the notion of the simulated body heat and breathing. Just the idea of the illusion of sleeping next to another person made me feel almost giddy, though it was a giddiness mixed with nausea. I vomited once before I managed to click the add to cart button. It sounds embarrassing, I know, but I actually cleaned my house in expectation of my guest. It was the closest thing I've ever had to inviting someone over, so I felt self-conscious about having the place I live in being a mess. I wanted to make a good impression. When it finally arrived, I hid in my living room for nearly 20 minutes until I was sure that the delivery driver had gone away. I double-checked they were gone by peeking through the peephole before finally dragging the box inside. Using a kitchen knife, I clumsily cut open the cardboard to reveal its contents, and after removing the bubble wrap, I immediately had to run to the kitchen sink to retch. The reason for my nausea-inducing anxiety was the following. The doll was not shipped with any clothes. In retrospect, it seems like it should have been obvious that this would be the case, but in the moment I felt betrayed and scared. Cutting open the box to reveal a naked human form was far too much for me in that moment, and I had to spend a few hours recovering. I had taken a week off from my work using my generous supply of built-up vacation days, thank God for online time off requests, so I wasn't too concerned about the delay this recovery caused. I had plenty of time. I grabbed some pajamas from my dresser and set about the task of clothing the doll. It took a while. I had to take breaks to avoid stressing myself out too much, but I did eventually manage to cover it up. With that issue settled, I felt significantly more comfortable. The doll was a little unnerving to look at, I'll admit that. People often talk about the uncanny valley, the conceptual zone in which an object looks human enough to be disturbing but not human enough to quite seem real. Sex dolls generally fall within this valley. They are designed, of course, for the sort of people who would buy a sex doll, and thus cater to this demographic standards of beauty. Gone are any traces of imperfection, any of those so-called flaws that make one truly beautiful. Instead, they are perfectly symmetrical, expressionless, and beautiful only by the standards of one so porn addicted as to have no standard for proper comparison. In some ways, this unsettling appearance was helpful for my peace of mind. It helped to remind me that as human as it looked like from a distance, in the end, it was only a hunk of rubber and plastic, and that I didn't need to fear it. I decided to name the doll Elsie. My first week spent with Elsie was less interesting than you might guess. It was about a day or two before I became fully comfortable talking with it. Before purchasing Elsie, my major outlet for my inner thoughts was a digital journal I kept on a cheap laptop, and so I wasn't especially used to saying much aloud before this. There would often go by weeks without me saying anything at all. There just wasn't any reason to do so. However, when I finally did get into the habit of talking to Elsie, it rapidly became addictive. When you haven't had a chance to talk to anyone in literal years, even a life-size silicone facsimile becomes appealing. I talked about my job, about every detail of my work week from cleaning the toilets to vacuuming the carpets. I talked about my favorite movie, The Last Man on Earth, my favorite book, The Night Land, and what I like to do in my free time, not much. I talked about my hopes and fears, my dreams and my ambitions. I must have spent hours at a time monologuing at Elsie. At this point, I had started to see the doll as she, rather than it. As the days went on, I began to wish that Elsie could talk back, but her motionless rubber lips would part to laugh or say something about herself. It was on the last day of the first week when I finally slept with the doll. I don't mean that as a euphemism for anything sexual, I just mean literally sleeping next to her in the same bed. I'd never shared a bed with anyone before, and I suppose I still haven't, but it was nevertheless a novel experience for me. I pressed the carefully hidden buttons that activated her simulated breathing and body heat, tucked her into bed next to me, and lay there listening, feeling the faint warmth next to me. I slept more soundly than I had in years. At first, my plan did seem to actually work. Getting a chance for even simulated social interaction did help to inoculate me against my anxiety just a little bit. I managed to squeak out a hello to the night security guard on my way into work, and though he seemed a bit surprised, he didn't seem uncomfortable or creeped out. He just smiled and nodded at me. I began to feel genuinely a little happier, a little more confident. It wasn't anything extreme, though. When I went shopping, I still had to go to the 24-hour supermarket right after my shift when hardly anybody was around, and I still had to use the self-checkout exclusively. I was far too scared to interact with a cashier. Once, a few years back, the self-checkout lanes were closed for maintenance one night, and I didn't go grocery shopping for a week because I was too scared to call and check if they were up and running again. But now, I felt like maybe I would be able to make that phone call if it ever happened again. The first sign that something might be wrong happened a month after I bought Elsie. I had left for work that evening with Elsie's hands placed in her lap, sitting on a chair in my bedroom. When I returned, her hands dangled at her sides. At the time, I fully assumed that I had either misremembered how I placed her, or perhaps the position in which I had placed her hands wasn't very stable and they had slowly fallen down to her sides over time. I was a little scared, a bit nervous, but I was able to rationalize it. This was just the first of Elsie's slight changes of position when I came back from work. There would sometimes be slight differences from how I had left her, but at first, there was never anything that seemed too unreasonable. If I had left her with legs crossed, they would be uncrossed when I got back. Hands folded on the table would be unfolded. An upright sitting position would become slightly slumped. Nothing that couldn't be explained by the force of gravity and slightly unstable positioning. The more disturbing development happened when I was in bed one morning with Elsie. My shift was from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., so I usually went to bed around 4 a.m., unless I had been going grocery shopping. I had, as usual, activated her simulated breathing and body heat, as I found it drastically aided in my falling asleep. I was just about to drift off into unconsciousness, listening to the slightly mechanical whirring sound of her breathing, when the comfortable white noise was interrupted with tinny, recorded moans. They were sexual, crass, and wholly unwanted. You must understand that I never actually used Elsie for her intended purpose. I thought about it a couple times, but could never work up the guts to actually do the deed. So this sound was completely alien to me. For a moment, I didn't even process that Elsie was the source of the noise, as I had never actually pressed the button which activated the moans before. I leapt out of bed, horrified, and crouched in the corner for a few minutes while I calmed myself down, trying to ignore the lewd sounds emanating from the humanoid figure lying in my bed. Eventually, I pulled myself together and pressed the hidden button that toggled her moaning, causing the noises to cease. I looked to see what could have accidentally pressed it to result in my scare, but I was at a loss. The button was located near the small of her back and took a fair amount of effort to press. It didn't seem possible that I could have somehow pressed it by accident. I didn't manage to get any more sleep that night. This was to be only the beginning of the unwanted sounds. More and more frequently when I came home from work, I would find that Elsie had somehow managed to turn herself on. And in addition to this, the changes in position had become increasingly less easy to ignore. On one occasion, her face was turned towards the door as if she had been waiting for me, her chest heaving up and down mechanically as her artificial exclamations of simulated pleasure echoed from her unmoving lips. She had been left facing the wall. It became difficult to fall asleep. As soon as I would begin to drift off, the pleasant white noise of her breathing would be interrupted with those incessant, unwanted moans. I eventually gave up on sleeping with the doll entirely, wearing earplugs and moving Elsie into the living room when I wanted to get some rest, despite the lonely sensation of the empty bed making it harder to drift off. In some ways, it almost felt as if I were undergoing an argument with a romantic partner, though I had no basis for comparison. Even after I stopped sleeping in the same bed as Elsie, the moans didn't stop tormenting me. In my dreams, I would be confronted by the doll, the pajamas I covered her with removed, exposing the silicone skin beneath. I dreamt that she chased me through an endless labyrinth of writhing, moaning rubber bodies melted together to form walls and corridors. I sometimes woke up screaming, the bed soaked through with sweat. It seems obvious now that I should have gotten rid of the doll as soon as the dreams began.
Girlfriends, what red flag did your boyfriend put up that you ignored only to be proven wrong months or years later? My boyfriend at the time started acting super sketchy. He wouldn't take my calls, or when he would hang up when I called. He blocked my number, and I knew something was wrong, so I went to his work and confronted him. He yelled at me that he didn't want to be around me, and then proceeded to block me in the work parking lot. We weren't fighting. We had no history of him being abusive, and it just didn't make sense. I accept that sometimes we fight and take time apart, but he was just acting distant and weird, which is something he never did, so I called his mom to see what was up. He was cheating with another girl, who was married and was trying to take that relationship to the next level by buying a house with him. He moved in with her after he forced me out of his apartment, and his poor mom had to deal with this mess. She apologized profusely and begged me to forgive her for allowing this to happen. She wanted me to accept the money that he and this other woman were going to use to buy a house and be done with it, but I wasn't having it. I didn't want the money from this cheating boss, and I didn't want to just pretend like it didn't happen. I needed closure and I got it, by beating the poop out of him and breaking up with him on the spot. He begged and pleaded for me to stay, but I saw right through his bullshit. He turned legit Christian and married that other woman, who divorced that married guy after finding out he cheated on her multiple times. Am I wrong for telling my boyfriend if he doesn't shower I'm leaving him? My boyfriend 21M and me 20F have been dating for 3 years. The relationship was going amazing until last month. He was watching YouTube and came across a video of a creator talking about how they don't shower for months at a time because apparently it's healthier. So he stopped showering and I told him that he needs to shower because it's F-king disgusting, and he just said he can do whatever he wants with his body and stormed off. Of course he can do what he wants, but if he's with me he has to shower, and I've been that he needs to shower for the past 3 weeks now and he still refuses. We ended up getting into a huge argument and we never fought. It got to the point where I screamed at him and told him that he smells like BO and if he doesn't shower I'm leaving him. I eventually packed a bag with essentials, grabbed my car keys and rented a hotel room for 2 nights. He blew up my phone non-stop telling me he's sorry and to come home. I eventually had to block his number due to him blowing up my phone. He used to take 2 showers a day, wear expensive cologne, and wear deodorant. Now he won't shower. Every time he hugs me or gets close to me I gag. What should I do? I met a girl, asked her on a date, and she broke her arm. Swiped on a girl on Tinder, didn't match yet. Her profile was memorable because I live in a small town and I didn't recognize her. Fast forward 2 hours and I go to work to clock in. My boss introduces me to the new girl. It's her. Since she either swiped left or she hadn't seen it yet, I didn't want her to think I swiped on her after we met without just talking to her in person. My awkwardness got the best of me and I brought it up, and we both had a laugh. We ended up going on a date, snowboarding, where she broke her arm in 4 places. I guess she'd never been snowboarding before. So I drove her down the mountain 3 hours with a broken arm to the hospital, which apparently her mother works. The x-ray tech thought we were dating and handed me the x-rays and asked if her mom knew she had nipple piercings. Hell, I didn't even know she had nipple piercings. Cue awkward moment with mom a few moments later. An 8-inch metal plate and several screws. I felt terrible and I helped her with lots of things over the next few weeks while she was practically disabled, and we ended up dating for a few months. I really actually liked her a lot, but I joined the army and she ghosted me while I was in basic training, but that's another story.
Teachers of Reddit, what is the weirdest excuse you've ever heard that turned out to be true? We had a kid in our class who was pure chaos. Came late all the time, forgot stuff, didn't do his homework, disruptive in class. You get the picture. One day he came to school over 2 hours late and said the bus he was on fell into a sinkhole. Everybody was like, yeah, right, until the news came in that there had indeed been a sinkhole from a tunnel construction and that indeed a bus had slipped into it. We never found out whether our classmate had actually been in it, but he swore he was. Me, the teacher, didn't make cookies for the last day of school before finals as promised because a car drove into my house and they cut off my gas line to check for leaks. I pulled up the local news article as evidence. My cousin took my homework on vacation to...
Don't want to drink ALC whole? Would you rather have gasoline? This actually happened when I was 15 and filled with innocence, misplaced confidence, and overall stupidity. My uncle and my dad's best friend had come over to shoot some pool and barbecue in our backyard for some summer fun. When we sat down to eat at a table we had situated outside, I was really surprised when my dad handed me a can of beer from the cooler. I had never had an alcoholic beverage, apart from little sips I had taken from my parents' mixed drinks over the years. My shock morphed into disinterest as I recalled the putrid taste of every alcoholic sample I had imbibed in the years past, despite how delicious each one looked. This was just a can of beer. No pretty coloring. No fancy, pureed fruit bits. And, perhaps most importantly, no tiny drink umbrella. No thanks. I said that I was okay and passed on the beer. Well, apparently it wasn't an offer, it was a demand. Something about wanting me to learn to drink responsibly at home and not from some frat guy in college. A little while later, my uncle, my dad's buddy and he all got up from the table to resume their pool playing on the third level. Our backyard is terraced and we had been eating on the second level. With my beer still largely untouched, I noticed my younger brother walking down towards the house. I called down to him and asked him to bring me a lemonade, since I was not too keen on the beer. My dad heard me as he was leaving the table. No lemonade. In fact, you can't have water either until you finish your beer. When I'm done kicking your uncle's ass, I expect your drink to be gone. Then he disappeared to the third terrace where he could no longer see me. I was thoroughly annoyed, thinking about the fact that most parents would be thrilled at their child's reluctance to drink. He was being the friend he never wanted me to have. Whatever. I had to move on. I started plotting how I would get out of drinking the beer. I could pour it out? No, that somehow seemed dishonest and a bit like cheating. I had to come up with something clever, something cunning. If only there were some loophole I could exploit. Cue my younger brother. He returned to the table with a giant jug of apple juice. My dad's last words to me rang through my mind and ears like a suppressed memory resurrected, kicking off a cacophony of rapid-firing neurons, each one communicating and internalizing the amazing opportunity that settled before me. He said no lemonade. He said no water. But he never said no apple juice. I seized my opportunity and grabbed a red Solo cup from the stack left over from lunch. I reeled the apple juice container over to me, and moved to unscrew the cap, but, weirdly, it was child-proofed. You know, the kind of lid that requires pushing down while simultaneously twisting. The fact that the lid on a beverage meant for people of all ages, including tiny children, with safety cap didn't strike my teenage, adult brain as odd. I kid you not, my only thought about it was wow. This is some top security apple juice. Yikes. So I unscrew the cap, since I'm obviously a capable young woman who knows her way around child-proof lids, and I pour myself a hefty helping of juice. Entirely melodramatically, I throw the brim to my lips, eager to erase the taste of yeast infection from my baby taste buds and replace it with sweet, sweet apple. My intention was to chug the juice to completion, and so it took my brain a minute to realize something was horribly, horribly wrong with this apple juice once the plan was set in motion. So much for those rapid-firing neurons. Mid-consumption, my first thought was that it tasted off. Maybe some kind of adult apple juice? It wasn't until after the first hulking gulp of juice was fully down my gullet that my brain had an ugly epiphany. This tastes a lot like gasoline smells. I panicked and swiftly spitted out the remainder, slapstick style, all over the ground. My younger brother, who I had failed to notice since he returned to the table, swung around to see what the commotion was. He had been facing away from me, filling a tiki torch with the same container I had just poured my juice from. The pieces unfolded in front of me like a crime scene, coming together into the world's most obvious puzzle. The lid. The taste. The tikis. The bewildered look of wide-eyed horror on my brother's face. I turned the container towards me to read the label. I just fucking drank kerosene. I audibly began praying to God to keep me from passing away from my idiotic mistake, as I read multiple warnings across the labeling stating do not consume and to seek immediate medical attention. And the kicker? I ended up chugging the rest of the beer to get rid of the taste of torch fluid. You win, Dad.
My neglectful family who abandoned me 30 years ago have just reached out demanding to resume contact, and my wife thinks I should comply. I'm a twin, and when I was born I hadn't developed my lungs fully, so I had to stay in the hospital for quite a while. Due to this I had a lot of developmental and emotional issues. Dyslexia and anger issues. Because of these issues I was treated poorly by my family. For example, on our birthdays I would ask for something and my brother would literally get it instead of me on my birthday. One year I asked for a boombox, not a big one but a smaller one, and my brother got it instead of me. Christmas came around, I asked for a remote-controlled car, brother got one, I was told due to funds I had to wait till after the first of the year to get my own. That never happened and I had no presents at all that year. I tried for years to show to my parents I was as good as my brother. In 6th grade, I worked hard to make sure I got good grades and ended with all B's, which was an achievement for a kid with dyslexia and ADHD. I showed it to my parents, being really proud of myself, and they said, "Oh nice, your brother got all A's." I think it was at this point I realized where I stood. I was just a roommate that they had to take care of, nothing more. So as a kid, I figured that if I can't get attention for positive things, then I'll do whatever I want, and if I get in trouble at least they would be forced to pay attention to me. So that's what I did, but even when I rebelled and got in trouble with the law, my parents refused to bail me out and I was off to juvie at the age of 15. When I turned 18, I was met at the door with a bag of clothes my parents gave me. I was told that I had to go, that they did their job and I needed to leave. I asked what about my brother. They stated he was going to be somebody as he was going to college, where I struggled in school, so clearly I was going to be a bum. So I grabbed my bag and my mom tried to hug me, but I ignored it and walked out the door never looking back. It took a while for me to get on my feet. Nowhere to go, no place to sleep and not a penny to my name. But I had some friends to rely on. Fast forward a few years and I met my wife while I was working at a gas station. We just clicked. Few years later we got married. We built a home together, something I never really had growing up. Back in 2005 we had a baby girl and 2 years later a boy. From my perspective my life is perfect. Family, home, a great job in it. That was until yesterday. I received a phone call from my mom, telling me my dad passed away. And that she and the family would hope that I could make it to the funeral. Mind you, I don't know how she got my number, but probably from my brother, but I was shocked to say the least. I told her I was busy working and would let her know later. She started to say something to the effect that they missed me and would like to be a part of my life or something like that, but I hung up. From my perspective I haven't heard a word from these people in 32 years. So why would I give them any more of my time? I told my wife, and although she knows about my family, she thought it would be the right thing to do. Seeing that my mom reached out to tell me, where she could have not told me, that they are family and probably feel bad and want to reconnect. However, as far as I'm concerned, I already have my family. Those other people are former roommates. That I have no obligation to anyone but those who I care about and who care about me. I get it, my wife loves me and is thinking of me and how I might regret not going. Just seems like they now know that dad is gone and life is short, so now guilt is creeping in and they don't want to die with that guilt. My friend showed me the easiest way to bag a girl. Now I'm living my best life with my future wife. I've always struggled with dating because I was scared of getting rejected, but that changed after doing this one thing my friend recommended. He had a successful dating life because he was supposedly charismatic and always knew what to say to women. I was jealous of him because I wanted to have that same level of experience, but my awkwardness was holding me back from following in his footsteps. Unlike him, I never had a real conversation with a woman and have been single for 23 years. We also had completely different ideas for a fun Saturday night. Where he would go out, I would stay home and binge watch anime. But day after day of doing the same thing, I got sick of this routine, and I fell into a rabbit hole of always comparing my dull life to his wild one. And one day of too much self-deprecating and wishing I was somebody else, I did something I never thought I would do. I downloaded Tinder because maybe I could talk to women online, just not in person. But setting up my Tinder profile was nearly impossible since I had no idea how to make a woman swipe right on me. My bio was pretty boring because I never did anything fun, and I didn't have any pictures that were Tinder worthy. I just did whatever and told myself it was okay because I was new to online dating. I wasn't expecting many matches, but I still wasn't happy that my messages were drier than the Sahara Desert. And the one time a girl swiped right on me, I had no idea how to keep the conversation going. I never thought I would be the type to ask a woman, "What are you doing?" every 5 minutes, but here I was doing that. She never talked to me again. I got fed up with my lack of social skills and inability to flirt, and I was determined to change. So, I asked my friend, since he was the only woman expert I knew. I called him and begged for him to share his secret sauce, or give me a few tips on how to talk to women. That's when he revealed something shocking. He used to be just like me, introverted, boring, and he didn't know a thing about women. I asked how he was able to change because I needed to change as well. He told me to use a dating AI and listed off some specific ones, but he said Pickup Pal helped him flirt better, so he recommended that to me the most. Obviously, I didn't believe him and thought he wanted to gatekeep his secret because there was no way an app could change an introvert into a playboy. But he was literal proof that it could, and I rarely saw him strike out with a girl. Honestly, I didn't want to take his advice because I thought he was messing with me. So, I started searching on Google to learn about women and how to interact with them. But every website I saw had the same generic information. Say hello, be yourself, be confident. None of that had worked because after saying hello, I would start stuttering and fumbling over my words. And I couldn't be confident because I didn't know how to. At that point, I was getting desperate, and it was clear the only way to break out of my monotonous routine was to download the dating AI. It couldn't hurt to try at this point, and even though I still didn't have high expectations for it, the app worked out better than I thought it would. I used it to fix my Tinder profile because it had a bio generator and photo analyzer. For my bio, I listed some of my interests and copied what it generated onto my Tinder profile. And it chose the best pictures to use, which, thank God, because I originally had a picture of me holding a fish on my profile, and I thought that was okay. The app told me to get rid of that first. It could also generate a response to a message to keep the conversation going, but I didn't have a use for that yet. However, with a new bio and pictures, I had 4 matches in just 3 days, and I used the dating AI on all of them. All my conversations went well because I was constantly generating interesting replies, and the women seemed interested in getting to know me. I was having fun texting people, and my phone was constantly blowing up from their messages. But it didn't take me long to realize I was only connecting with one girl since we had the most in common. We started bonding over One Piece and Valorant, and our conversations quickly moved on to other interests. Talking to her felt natural, and I only used the AI when our conversations started dying because I never wanted to stop talking to this girl. After 3 weeks of nonstop texting, I asked her out on a date. She said yes, but then realized I had no idea where to take her. I was about to freak out, but I checked the AI to see if it had anything that would help me, and it had a date generator. All I had to do was put a location and her interests, and then it would pick the perfect places to take her. I chose to take her to this popular Mexican restaurant, and she loved the food. I was mostly worried about our date being awkward or me not knowing what to say because it felt like I had relied too much on the AI to help me. But our conversation went smoothly, just like it did over text, and using the AI consistently meant I knew what to say when our talks died down. Talking about things I liked and asking her if she liked it too had us talking for a while, and I got to know her by asking about her past. That was my first date, and I enjoyed it so much that I couldn't wait to go out with her again. Our conversations extended past texting, and it was clear we were both into each other, so I asked her to be my girlfriend. We've only been dating for 2 months, but I'm really happy with her. Though I'll admit, I still use Pickup Pal when I want to take her on dates because I always want things to be perfect for her. I really hope she never finds out. I made my brother think he has alopecia for the last 15 years. This is probably the pettiest thing I have ever done, and I regret it to this day. When I was 15 years old, I got my first job and started to have some money of my own. I used my money to spoil myself and purchase nicer things like clothes, shoes, makeup and salon brand shampoo. My brother used to sneak into my bathroom and constantly steal my nice shampoo. He would use them and most of the time he would leave them open in the bathtub. This would result in the rest of the shampoo going down the drain and leave me with empty containers. This drove me completely insane and I hated him for taking my things. I tried to speak with my parents about this, but they told me that I should just learn to share. One day I went out and purchased hair removal cream. I mixed this into my shampoo bottle and left it in my bathroom. I gave him a verbal warning not to use my newly purchased bottle, but he stole it again anyway. Over the next few days his hair slowly started to fall out and small bald patches started to appear. Seeing what I had done I immediately emptied the remaining shampoo. I felt terrible and I truly didn't think it would have as dramatic an effect as it did. My mother took him to the doctor to get checked out and they diagnosed him with alopecia. He then had to start using this special and terrible smelling shampoo to combat this. His hair did grow back, but I just recently found out that he is still using the shampoo in order to prevent another alopecia flare-up. It has been 15 years now and I have never told my brother that I caused him to lose his hair.
My husband cheated on me with his co-worker. The reason? I have an IQ of 152. My husband always complimented me on being bright. I love that about him. He had such pride that his wife is smart and he would tell this to anyone, but everything changed about 6 months ago when he insisted that we would take IQ tests. I never done this before because I really don't care about these things. Anyway, I scored 152 and he scored 133. He was in shock and very subdued for several weeks afterwards. I honestly noticed his sudden moodiness and I knew why, but it was just too awkward to try and talk to him about it. I didn't want to embarrass him. What made it worse is that we did the test via his work so his coworkers knew about it. Things went back to normal after a couple of months. He wasn't as affectionate anymore and he certainly never brought up my intelligence nor complimented me on it ever, but he was pleasant and happy again. It turned out he only went back to normal because he started getting with a coworker. I found out everything when I saw his friend's conversation with him about how he felt turned off by me after the test. He brags about his affair and apparently his friends and brother and all their wives know about it. It's so odd because I'm still the same me. I didn't change and I never take these tests seriously, and he always knew that I was smart. What changed now? I haven't spoken to him yet about anything, not sure I will either. Clearly his affair made him feel good about this whole thing again because he's back to being pleasant to be around. I love my life and I don't want to change it, especially when our children are still too young and need us. I just needed to get this off my chest and get some perspective. Why this sudden turn off by me?
My husband's beard gave me a yeast infection and now he won't shave it. We're due to get married in 7 weeks and I don't know how to convince him to shave his beard. For about a week, I've been feeling a burning sensation in my vade during intimacy and while I'm urinating. The area has also been irritatingly itchy, so I went to my OB-GYN because this was the first time this has happened and I didn't know what was going on. She found that I have a yeast infection and asked me if I shower regularly, wear underwear all the time, use scented products on the area, or use antibiotics. I said yes to the first question and no to the 3 other questions. I then told her that my fiancé has recently grown out his beard and I've been experiencing rashes and burns when he goes down on me because his beard is not soft, as I've never seen him use oil, which I heard greatly moisturizes and softens the beard hairs, but I didn't think that could have caused the infection. She prescribed me some antifungal medication and informed me that I should talk to my fiancé regarding this issue. Once I got the chance to talk to my fiancé about it, he said that he doesn't wash his beard separately, just splashes water on it when he washes his face. I told him that his beard is probably what gave me the yeast infection, since I know that I take care of myself properly and that he needs to groom himself better. He said he doesn't believe that it was his beard that caused it, but rather it was entirely my fault and my hygiene that was causing the problem. I told him that he just needs to shave his beard if he is incapable of keeping it groomed. He refused by saying that he spent a long time growing his beard and he won't shave it just because I'm accusing him of being the cause of my problem. So I told him that oral is completely off the table because even though it was incredible when he went down on me, lately it has been more pain than pleasure because of the burns that I've been experiencing. He started whining that one of the best moments of having intimacy with me is with his head between my legs, to which I agreed and again offered that he can either shave his beard or simply groom it so it won't infect and irritate my lower area. He still refused because beard oils are unnatural, and the same thing about how long it took for him to grow out his beard. I'm now at a loss as to how I can solve this issue because I love him and all I need from him is to groom his damn beard. What are some small facts that might save your life one day? If someone is attempting to kidnap you, your best and often only hope of survival is to resist at the moment of abduction. If someone is threatening you with a knife or a gun, it might seem like fighting them or running away is a poor choice, particularly if there's many of them. But if they tell you to go somewhere with them, your best hope of seeing your family again is to not cooperate. Your chances of escaping or being saved drop massively the second you are taken to a secondary location. If you do end up being kidnapped, you need to escape ASAP. Every second you are under their control, your chances go down and down. After 24 hours, you're basically dead. If you're lucky, they will kill you outright. If you're unlucky, I probably shouldn't describe what might happen if you're unlucky, Rest assured I've seen the after effects. Often if someone is attempting an abduction their mind is on scaring and securing you, which means they aren't actually ready to kill you. This means running is a very good option, because you have at least 2 seconds before their mindset even goes to causing you harm. Make a lot of noise, and run towards other people, in a zigzag if they have a gun. Now their mind is on escape, they have nothing to gain by killing you, and they're smart enough to know that doing so only increases the ferocity that the police will pursue them with. Ida for leaving dinner because my sister was late. Again? I, 27F, had plans to go out to dinner with my sister, 30F, as we do every month. She lives in my hometown and I live in the next state over with my BF. We're about 35 minutes to an hour apart depending on traffic. We agreed to meet closer to hometown with my mom. One thing about her, she is always late. I expect she'll always be at least 30 minutes late, but it's been up to a few hours. And not just random plans, weddings and graduations too. It's been brought up in the past by mom and I, but she always brushes it off and gets upset. My BF drove me over. I can't drive and he offered to drop me before he had to head out for plans of his own near home and come back when he was done. I assumed after dinner we would just hang out at her house either way. Get to the place and start calling my sister. She usually doesn't say if she's gonna be late, but if my mom is with her she does, and I hadn't heard anything. I get mom a few minutes later and she says they're behind because it took a while to get my nephew who's almost 1 ready and my sister got in the shower later than expected. I didn't even know my nephew was coming and she usually tells me if he is. Her husband was apparently there to let mom in when she showed up but went back to sleep as soon as she got there. Not sure why he couldn't help get baby ready, but that's none of my business. I check maps and it says 35 minutes. Today I effed up by meeting a girl who made me doubt my long-term relationship. My story is so cliché it hurts to write it. But I do need advice. I, 30M, have been in a relationship for 4.5 years with a girl, 27F, that I love. Nothing is ever perfect but overall we have a good relationship. First 9 to 12 months were great even though there were some painful points. At the time I thought that was perfectly normal and that we would work it out. Well, we didn't. Time passed and the painful points remained. They're even stronger in some cases now, but I thought we would find a solution. I started to believe that relationships were about sacrifice and commitment, so facing our problems would work out. Now I'm 30, spent the last 5 years getting my shit together, matured, changed jobs, found a fitness routine I like, and went to therapy. I grew a lot, and she didn't. I thought she needed more time, that I should do more, but everything is more serious now. The next steps are buying a place to live and having kids pretty soon. I feel like time is playing against me. I intended to wait a little longer even though I knew it wasn't wise. But every time we'd have a talk things would not change and I'd just hurt her. So I stopped and thought I was the problem. I should focus on myself and try to be better for her. And then I met this girl. We met at a friend's birthday party about 2 months ago. We instantly liked each other. Fast forward to now, I've seen her a couple more times, so many birthdays in summer, and we constantly chat. I know she is very much into me, as I am into her. I think about her all the time. She went on a road trip and I can say that I miss her. The farthest things have gone is when she kissed my neck when saying goodbye. I feel bad writing this, but this has made things so much harder. Here is this amazing girl and she wants me. It made all the doubts I had for the past 3 years bubble up on the surface and I don't know what to do. My current relationship is not great. But it's good. My girlfriend has her default, but so am I. Am I wrong for feeling like I want more from my love life? I'm very good at preventing myself from doing things, not so good at forcing myself though. I could stop talking to this girl. But should I? Update, am I the jerk for leaving my surprise wedding because I felt blindsided? I previously omitted this from my post because of the subreddit's word count guidelines. I love surprises, it's a thing everyone has known me to love. Mark, knowing that, the fact I wanted to marry him, and said wedding planning was stressful, thought a surprise wedding would be perfect. A surprise engagement is bland, because it will always be a surprise but not a wedding. He threw this wedding for the surprise, but explained how in a couple days we could do a courthouse wedding to make it legal. This was his only way to surprise me. I love spontaneity, but legal marriage or not, I wanted a say in my wedding. To choose the perfect date, to choose my bridesmaids, to pick out my cake. Again, due to these thoughts everyone thinks I'm the jerk, because I could have went along with the party, and do a redo legal wedding. But again I felt blindsided and confused, so I left. I want to start off by thanking everyone for the responses I got and the advice. However, I would like to reiterate that Mark is a great person who did a stupid thing. If you knew me though, a surprise wedding seems like something I would love. Unfortunately I didn't. After talking to Mark we both got to the conclusion that we didn't do anything wrong. Both of us are valid in our opinions and the situation was an odd one. Unfortunately, Mark spent a lot of money on planning this wedding, as well as family members. He doesn't think that we have the funds to plan another wedding until a couple years. I will be honest, that choice is really messing with me. I'd like to be married sometime soon, and start out life as a family. I know weddings don't have to be extravagant. We could always throw a small party, and once we have enough money do a second on, but I don't know if that's what I want. I honestly feel selfish and regret not using the surprise wedding. I feel like I wasted a bunch of money. I used to stand by my choice confidently, but now I'm not sure I made the right choice and all this stress is wearing me down. Anyway, I'm staying with Mark, probably will get married soon, and have my dream wedding in the near future hopefully. Again, Thanks to all the responses, and I hope people from Ida also see this post.
What did your child do that was so despicable that you will never forgive them? I regret giving birth to this devil every day. This Saturday, my son will have been sober for 18 months. He got his GED this year, and he starts a community college at the end of August. He finally has a job that I didn't get for him, soon he will be moving into his own apartment, and he hasn't missed a single appointment with his therapist. He has done everything you would expect of a precocious 17-year-old who hit a rough patch after meeting with a particularly bad influence. He is 29. His mother and I gave him every opportunity we could. I don't expect any praise for that, because, unlike my son, I don't expect praise for doing what you're supposed to. She and I worked hard to give him a loving, stable, comfortable, supportive home. We were involved in his school, we introduced him to music and sports and culture, we fed him healthy meals, and we played with him. He started shoplifting at 15. The first time we caught him, we bodily dragged him back to the store, made him return the copy of Grand Theft Auto and apologize, and offered to pay for any damages. The second time we caught him, we did the same thing. The third time, we started going to family therapy. Therapy seemed to go well, and after a few sessions, the therapist asked for a few one-on-ones with him. After 2 of those, the police came knocking on our door, because the little brat had concocted some story about how we were a religious cult who attacked him at breakfast every Saturday, and the dumb therapist actually believed him. Rational heads prevailed, we fired that therapist, and he went through 6 more in as many months, until eventually, we couldn't find anyone who would take him as a patient. By 16, he was drinking. Then we found grass in his bedroom and in our bedroom. He started leaving needles and glass where he knew we'd eventually find them, just to mess with us. I know this because he said so, in those exact words. He had his first intervention and first trip to rehab that year, and his first relapse. He had to repeat a year of high school at 17, which meant he was now the ringleader of a group of other young idiots, who saw him as this totemic mentor who could hook them up with whatever they wanted. I'm also damn sure he started getting with one of his gang's 13-year-old sisters around then, but I had nothing to go on but my own instincts, so all I could do was tell her parents to keep an eye on her. No charges were ever pressed, and the family never spoke to me again after that, but they did pull both of their kids out of that school, and my son was furious at me for daring not to let him continue committing this crime. While I was away, he spent an uncharacteristic night at home and on his best behavior. After his mother went to sleep, he followed her to her bedroom. He took a knife with him. He crept into the room, straddled her, put the blade to her throat, and attacked her. I don't know exactly what happened next. I know he held her down. I know she fought. I know he stabbed her. I know she got away and locked herself in the bathroom before he could catch her. I hope that means she kicked him good in the groin. I know she broke the window and screamed for help. I know he ran. I know she was lucky the ambulance got to her before she bled to death. I know he called his friends to brag and beg for a ride. I know the police caught him. I know if I'd been home, or if I caught him, I'd have unalived him with my bare hands. The state tried my son as an adult. He pleaded out, but only after making his mother testify and smiling the whole time. She divorced me a month after his sentencing. I looked too much like him. She took her own life a year later. I would be a liar if I said I didn't blame him for her death because I absolutely do. He was sober when she went to her room, sober when he pulled out his knife, sober when he climbed on top of her, sober when he attacked her, sober when he stabbed her, sober when he ran, sober when he called his friends to brag, and sober when the police found him. When I made the mistake of visiting him after the divorce, he laughed and said I could never satisfy her. When I made the mistake of visiting him after she was gone, he laughed again. I should have unalived him right there. It is to my eternal shame that I did not. They let him out after serving 3 years. He spent the next 6 years on the streets, in and out of rehab, on and off other people's couches, and would grace me every 6 months or so with a phone call demanding money. Eventually, I refused to talk to him unless it was to drive him back to rehab, and I stopped completely after he stole my wallet. 2 years ago, he came to my house with his aunt in tow and crocodile tears in his eyes. He pretended to apologize. I slammed the door. His aunt barges in to try to shame me into forgiving the man who attacked my wife, caused her death, and laughed about it. He slashed my tires, threw a brick through a window, and drove off in her car. His aunt had no idea that he'd taken our keys, or that he'd been armed the whole time. She blamed me. He guilted her into letting him stay with her, went to rehab and relapsed, then went again, and here we are. My son has pretended to reform before. He has even convinced himself once or twice. But he always backslides, always relapses, always finds new ways to disappoint, and always hurts other people for his own short-sighted benefit. His aunt is already at the stage where she is pretending she must have forgotten where she put some knick-knack or piece of jewelry and has already told me to F off after I've warned her of what my son can, will, and has done before, and what he will do again now that he thinks she is weak. When he messes up again, when he hurts someone else with his ceaseless BS, I will not be there to pick up after him. I am through with him. I am through with his aunt. I Cannot talk to her without being overcome with rage and shame as I see the stupid hope I used to have that my son would ever amount to anything, and that I do not need any more disappointment and failure in my life. I am not proud of my son. I am sorry for inflicting him upon the world.
F you, Cody. F you, Cody. Yeah, you self-centered prick. Let me tell you a little story about this asshole named Cody that I once knew. So, back in the day, I used to work with Cody at this shitty dead-end job. Let me tell you, he had one hell of an ego. Always strutting around like he owned the place, thinking he was God's gift to mankind. And God, did he love to rub it in your face whenever he got a promotion or accomplished something. It was like he thrived off making everyone else feel like poop. Now, Cody had this habit of talking down to everyone, acting all superior and smug. He'd belittle you for the simplest mistakes, gloating about his own success while making sure you knew just how much better he was than you. It was infuriating, but I kept my cool because I didn't want to stoop to his level. But let me tell you, karma has a way of coming around, and it hit Cody hard. You see, this arrogant prick never took care of himself. He smoked like a chimney, drank like a fish, and never bothered to exercise. Meanwhile, the rest of us tried to take care of ourselves, eating healthier, exercising, and just generally trying to live our lives. Fast forward a few years, and it hits me like a ton of bricks. Cody was looking rough. His hairline was receding faster than a cat chasing a laser pointer, and his beer gut had grown to epic proportions. But you know what? He still acted like he was the king of the world. One day, Cody suddenly had a health scare. Turns out, his years of neglecting his own well-being caught up to him. He was diagnosed with some serious poop, something that happens when you ignore your body's desperate cries for help. The doctor told him he had to make some drastic lifestyle changes if he wanted to live. And you know what Cody did? He effing ignored it, like the stubborn idiot that he was. He continued living his reckless life, ignoring the advice, thinking he was invincible. It was like a sick joke, watching this guy slowly destroy himself. But here's the jaw-dropping moment, the twist that took everyone by surprise. Cody suddenly vanished from the workplace. Just disappeared, like a fart in the wind. And you want to know why? Well, turns out he had been admitted to the hospital. We all thought he was done for, but then something miraculous happened. He made a full recovery. We were all ecstatic, and Cody seemed to be a changed man. He had finally seen the light, and was determined to turn his life around. He quit smoking, started exercising, and made a conscious effort to take better care of himself. It was like a new lease on life for the guy, and we all couldn't be happier for him. Fast forward a few months, and Cody was looking better than ever. He had dropped a few dress sizes, and his hairline had even started to grow back in. Everyone was congratulating him on his transformation, and it seemed like he was finally getting his life back on track. But then, something unexpected happened. Cody suddenly disappeared again. We all thought he had gone back to his old ways, but then we got news that he had been admitted to the hospital again. This time, it was much more serious. We all rushed to the hospital, expecting the worst. But when we got there, we were shocked to find that Cody was still alive. He had been in a coma for weeks, but somehow, he had managed to pull through. We were all in disbelief, but the doctors told us that Cody had been fighting a rare and incurable disease. It was a miracle that he had survived, and we were all filled with joy. But then, something even more unbelievable happened. Against all odds, Cody made a full recovery. It was like a miracle, and we were all ecstatic. But then, we noticed something strange. Cody was different. He had a newfound appreciation for life, and was determined to make the most of it. He quit his job, sold all his possessions, and set off to travel the world. So, F you, Cody. You may have been an arrogant prick, but you showed us all that it's never too late to turn your life around. And in the end, you were nothing more than a reminder that life is precious, and should never be taken for granted. I am in love with my older cousin. I am 15, and he is 25. I know that he's way out of my age league, but hear me out. I have major daddy issues and have always been attracted to older men, so it was no surprise for me when I felt an attraction to him. I have known him ever since I was 3. That's when his sister got married to my mom's uncle, basically one of my grandfather. I have fooled around with him many times. He carried me many times. I even sat on his and pretended to cut his hair when I was 8, he was 15 then. But I never felt any kind of attraction to him. As we grew up, we became more distant, which is normal given that we were from opposite gender. We barely ever talked when we saw each other. Hell, we didn't even look at each other. But something changed last month at my aunt's wedding. Before diving in more, I'd like to clarify that I'm Balkan, so our weddings are hella long. We went to our grandma's home earlier than other times because we had a lot of preparation to do. A few days before we left, I came down 104 degrees fever and could barely move. So I was sick the whole time. Since I had such a high fever, I had lost my appetite and was sleepy all day. One such day I had just woken up from an afternoon nap when I realized I hadn't showered yet. So I patted my way towards the well. My grandma's home is in a village, so they don't have showers. I had just finished showering and was putting on my clothes when he walked in. The shower area is covered closed, by the way. For a moment I couldn't speak or move. I had just managed to get my dress halfway over my chest. He just stood there. Not once did he look down. I don't know how much he could see. Judging by the placement of my clothes, he could see my full stomach and probably half of my chest. We stood there for a good 20 seconds before he apologized and left like nothing happened. I was so shocked that I couldn't move for a good minute. After that I avoided him as much as I could, and thankfully he pretended like nothing happened. But God had other plans. Later that night as I was about to sit down to eat, I noticed that my seat was next to him. I tried my best to act cool but deep down I was dying from embarrassment. I love eating shrimps, but sadly they ran out of it and I was getting a little whiny. Suddenly he handed over the shrimp my mom gave him. I was stunned to say the least. He never did that before. He even poured a glass of water for me. There's one more story. There was another event after the wedding and we were coming home after the event. I was wearing heels all night and had sore legs. This man literally massaged my legs gently with some medicine. He had no reason to do so but he did anyways. There are many more small things like these that he did which he has never done before. We also made intense eye contact. I could always feel him looking at me whenever I was playing with his niece. Like those times where you can feel the tension? Yeah, these were those moments. I don't know if I'm delusional or overthinking small things but he never did those before so I'm confused. I'll see him in a few months and I don't have any idea as to what to do. So please help me and let me know what situation am I in? Does he like me or am I delusional? People who have snapped on a bully at school, what's your story? In 4th grade Ronnie and Freddie kept ridiculing me, making remarks, teasing me at recess. I was raised to be peaceful and accommodating. I tried to ignore them, but it got under my skin. I decided to stay near the teacher during recess. They left me alone then, but I couldn't stay near the teacher all the time. They accused me of being the teacher's pet. That bugged me even more. This went on for weeks. When recess was over we lined up on the sidewalk to go back indoors. One day Ronnie was right behind me. He started teasing me. I lost it. I took him down. When they pulled me off him I was pounding his head against the pavement. Ronnie stopped teasing me. Noting the improvement, I challenged Freddie to a fight after school. A crowd gathered. It took only a few seconds for me to pin Freddie to the ground and force him to surrender. That ended the teasing from Freddie. A day or two later my mother and I were called to the principal's office. My father was overseas in combat. Ronnie and his mother were there. I never knew where Ronnie's father was. As soon as the meeting started, Ronnie's mother launched into an indictment of me. Before she was finished the principal cut her short. Now let's hear the other side, she said. I stated my case. The principal heard me out, then said, "Gentlemen, don't fight. It's against the rules to fight on the school ground. I want you two to shake hands and apologize." I did as told. Ronnie had to be prompted to apologize. But that's not the end of it. Years later, in my early 20s I had a job at a research institute at university. The institute director's beautiful young wife said to me, "A young man called Ronald J. was just hired. He says he beat you up in grade school." "That's not exactly how I remember it," I replied. "I'm not surprised," she said. A week later there was a party at the director's house. Ronnie and I were there. Ronnie was slender, maybe 5 feet 9 inches. I was 6 feet 4 inches, about 195 pounds, and ran 6 miles per day. The director's wife maneuvered Ronnie over to the group where I was, and said, "Ronald, let's hear how you beat up Polanski in grade school." Ronnie mumbled something about a mistaken impression and left shortly afterward. He was careful to avoid me from then on. Sometime during the next year or so I laughed and mentioned it to my mother. She said the principal had said to her, "I wish I had been there to see it when Polanski pounded Ronnie's head on the sidewalk." Which ancient culture was way more f***ed up than most people know. So, you know how everyone thinks the Mayans were these peaceful farmers who worshipped the sun and made pretty calendars? Yeah, well, turns out they were also into some seriously effed up poop. Apparently, the Mayans were big on human sacrifice. Like, they would straight up unalive people as a sacrifice to their gods. But it wasn't just any old person they picked off the street, they specifically targeted the most fit and healthy members of their community. Why, you ask? So they could rip their still beating hearts out and offer them up as a sacrifice. And get this, they didn't just do this poop once in a while. Nah, they had a whole system set up where they would have multiple human sacrifices a day. They would even have these gigantic public ceremonies where they would parade the chosen sacrifice around before unaliving them. But wait, it gets even effing crazier. You know how we like to think that ancient cultures were all about tradition and preserving their customs? Well, the Mayans took that poop to a whole new level. They would actually purposefully deform their own children by binding their skulls and breaking their bones, all so they could look more like the gods they were sacrificing to. And if that wasn't enough, they would also practice self-mutilation as a form of worship. I mean, what the actual F, right? I thought the Mayans were supposed to be all enlightened and poop, but it turns out they were just a bunch of egotistic cheats who thought their gods needed a steady diet of human hearts. So next time someone tries to tell you how great the ancient Mayans were, you can just tell them they were a bunch of effed up psychopaths.